Hello there, friends. This is Spencer Michaud, and today we're going to be talking about the Astrology of March 2023. I hope you're doing well out there. I've missed you all. I had a little bit of a vacation. I don't know if it's a real vacation. It was the type of vacation that you have when you have lost power and heat for 6.5 days. So I'm happy to report that I did survive and that the power is back on, obviously. And we'll be talking about the Astrology of March today. So I apologize for being a few days late with this, but I was in survival mode, hanging out in the 40-degree weather in my house and trying to figure out what the next steps were. So I hope that you're having a better week than me. We had some pretty nasty ice storms over the last few weeks here. We had another round of it last night, and I was a little nervous that we were going to get shut down again, but here we are. So I'm welcoming some new friends here today. Steven, the Jupiterian, is here tuning in from San Francisco, California. Hello, friend. We have Rachel Fletcher here joining from Virginia. Hello, Rachel Fletcher. Nice to see you. So we've got people stopping in on the chat. Just let me know that you're here. Tell me where you're stopping in from. It's always nice to see your wonderful faces here. We're going to go on a journey today. We're going to go a few hours, like we normally do here. Go through the decans that the sun is going to be traveling through each section of the month. We're going to be going over lunations, the new full moons and the quarter moons. We're going to be going over the ingresses of new planets. This is a pretty big month, especially with Saturn moving into Pisces. After spending multiple years in Saturn-ruled signs, Saturn will be moving into a Jupiter-ruled sign for the first time in quite some time. And then we will be also seeing Pluto moving into Aquarius, which is a really big deal as well. So we'll talk about all that. We'll talk about the smaller ingresses as well, including Mercury moving into Pisces and then into Aries, and then the sun moving into Aries as we enter our spring equinox time. And of course, Mars is going to be moving into Cancer after many months in Gemini as well. So it's really big month with astrology. We'll talk about solar phases today, including Saturn emerging as a morning star, a Mercury cazimi, and Jupiter moving under the beams of the sun. We'll also take a look at some of the out-of-bounds planets, including Mars, which is out of bounds all month, a few out-of-bounds phases of the moon, and as we normally do on this show, we will talk about an animal that can help us to learn what types of things we need to do to survive the month ahead, or to thrive, I guess I would say. And then we'll also do a hexagram from the I-Ching. So welcoming a few more friends here today. KP1231 is joining us from Cleveland. Hello, friend. Laura Etta is here from Vancouver, Washington. Very cool. Tarja is here from Finland saying, so nice to see that you survived. Yes, it was a journey, friends. It was, we had a branch that, fell off the tree. We had a really nasty ice storm. It was one of the worst ice storms in the last 50 years, they were saying. And the ice got really heavy on the branches, and the branches would just crack off and take out various power lines. There were over 600,000 people that were without power in Michigan alone after that storm. And we were one of the unlucky few that it took almost a week to get our power back on, since ours was disconnected right from the house. It wasn't like a big grid had gone down, so they had to send an individual crew out to our house to fix it. And we kind of stuck it out in the house because we have two kitties that were starting to look a little lethargic after a couple days, and the power company kept telling us that they were going to turn it back on, and the estimate kept changing for 3 or 4 days, and that was frustrating. But I do want to say that I really appreciate all of you who have reached out and offered to help. I had a few friends that were able to donate some resources to us to be able to help us to replace some of our food that we lost, and kind of put some money towards maybe a backup generator so that this does not happen again. So if you want to help with that, and you literally want to help us keep the lights on so we can keep doing these shows, you can donate to the super chat here with a little $sign in the chat, or you can buy me a coffee at buymeacoffee.com. That is always helpful. And we'll talk about this as we get to Pluto and Aquarius, but I think that this is not going to be an uncommon thing moving forward. This is the second major power outage we've had in the Midwest in the last 6 months. We had one, I believe, last August that lasted for almost 3 days as well. So we're going to see more severe weather events going forward. And I think being prepared for that is really important. But I want to say thank you to those of you who have supported Tanya and myself. Tanya, of course, from Third Coast Mojo, who has been on the channel as well, my partner. We really appreciate you, and we really appreciate all of you that have shown your support. And I hope we can continue to show up for you like this as well, just like you're showing up for us. So I really appreciate you. Okay, so one other announcement, a couple announcements. So I have a few things new in the store. The Decans of Pisces is on sale until the end of Pisces seasons, which goes until the 18th. The 20th of March. Goes till the 20th of March, so you can get your hands on the Decans of Pisces webinar for 20% off. I also just posted today the Stars and Cards Tarot as an Astrological Storytelling Device talk that I did as part of the winter speaker series for Nightlight Astrology. That is in the store now, and I've put that on sale for 20% off until the end of March. So if you want to get your hands on that at a discounted price at 20% off, pick it up. It's in the store. There's a link in the chat, or there's a link in the description of this video, or you can go to my website, spencermichaud.com. Okay, so those are sort of the big things going on. Speaking of Third Coast Mojo, Tanya just released a new product as well. She has started doing custom oil blends that are tailored to your specific natal chart and to your own olfactory desires, like new scents, new herbs, or whatnot. That's a pretty cool service. Check her out at Third Coast Mojo, which is the Etsy that she does her business under. Okay, friends. Edwina is here. Hello, Edwina. Thank you, Edwina. Edwina, thank you for your help over the last few days as well. Really appreciate you. Ani is here. Hello, Ani. Just really, this community is awesome. I'm really, it's hard for me to ask for help sometimes. And I just really appreciate all of you who have stepped up and really kind of gotten us out of a really tight spot in the last few weeks here. Okay, so how about we talk some astrology? And thanks for your patience with this talk. Like, after you go through an experience like that, we were literally sleeping in 40-degree weather for a week straight. It felt like I was outside for 7 days straight, basically. And it really has given me a new perspective on people that are experiencing housing insecurity and things of that nature, because it really just makes it difficult to do anything. You're constantly in fight or flight mode. Your body is worn down. We really weren't able to eat some of the regular healthy food that we were usually used to eating, and that really takes a toll on your body. So just something to think about, and the gratitude for having a place to live and having like a community like this. I'm really grateful for it. So have compassion for those folks out there that are struggling. Again, that can give you a whole new perspective when you lose something that you potentially take for granted, just like heat or electricity. I mean, those are basic human needs, I guess, but not everybody has access to that. And I think, again, we'll talk about that more as we talk about Pluto and Aquarius, because I think community and the support of our fellow folks is going to be the way that we get through some of these really important changes that we're going to be experiencing as a collective. How are we building the networks that we need to be able to support one another? What kind of friendships are we making? If we have abundance in one area, how do we offer that to someone who may be lacking in that particular area, and vice versa? How do we create circuits of exchange? I mean, these are some of the questions that we'll be trying to answer for the next 20 years with Pluto moving into Aquarius. So again, we got some time to figure this out, but we're heading into some really interesting waters here. Okay, looking at the chat. Let's see. Ani says, the recent speaker series was amazing. Highly recommend. Well, thank you, friend. I really had a nice time chatting about that. And we did all sorts of stuff with that. We talked about the Rider-Waite Tarot. We talked about the synchronization with the Golden Dawn system. We talked about the Decans. I did chart examples on how I use that in my reading techniques for clients and for the work that I do here in these live streams. And yeah, I feel like it was a really good, we had good conversations as well. So check that out. It's in the store now. Okay, Steven says I had a very isolating 53rd birthday on Thursday. Oh, happy birthday, Steven. It was nice to meditate and start a new year. Well, I'm sorry that you were so isolated, but here you are in a community of friends here. So happy birthday to you, late birthday, and hopefully we'll provide some of that warmth for you here today. Julene is here. Hello, Julene. Thank you again, Julene, for your help and generosity as well. So many friends I'm seeing that were able to be supportive. So you're going to hear me like a broken record today, just expressing my gratitude. All right, friends, let's take an overview for the month. So we are going to be taking a look at the big picture. So I'm going to just run through some of the bigger picture things. Then we'll focus our lens down in smaller and smaller increments. So we have 4 lunation phases here in March. We have a full moon that is going to be on the 7th of March, which is a really big day. That's the same day that Saturn ingresses into Pisces. So that's one to mark on your calendar, March 7th, which is the full moon at 16 degrees of Virgo that is trined Uranus. And we'll talk about that more as we go further on the show today. We have a last quarter moon on the 14th of the month, which is going to be at 24 degrees of Sagittarius. So that's going to be the Pisces sun squaring the Sagittarius moon in the 3rd decans of those signs. So these are going to be times where we're really trying to bring something to completion around that period of time and maybe releasing something, right? Like last quarter moons help us to release things. They bring about some sort of existential crisis that helps us say, well, what do we want to do next? How do we consolidate the wisdom from this cycle and move on to the next one? We're going to have a new moon on the 21st of March at 0 degrees Aries. So we're going to see the sun ingress into Aries and then immediately have a new moon. Now, this new moon is going to be squared. I have some confusion about this because Mars is going to be in Gemini, but it's going to be at the very end degrees of Gemini. So there's a degree-based square between the new moon in Aries and Mars, but not by sign. So we'll have to see how that works out when we have a planet that's sextile by sign but squared by degree. On the 28th, we will have the first quarter moon of that phase at 8 degrees of Cancer. So full moon on the 7th, last quarter on the 14th, another new moon on the 21st, and then the first quarter at the 28th. We have a number of ingresses this month, which is a fancy word for a planet moving into a new sign. On the 2nd, we had Mercury moving into Pisces. So Mercury moving into its exile and fall. It's doubly debilitated in that particular sign. Although it's not as big of a death sentence as some traditional astrologers would have you believe, there are always ways to view it through a lens that can be helpful. I think that when Mercury is in a Jupiterian sign, we don't necessarily see, we don't communicate in the same way that we normally would. We might communicate through song. We might communicate through poetry. We might communicate through figurative language and symbol, which can make clear communication difficult sometimes because we're often having to guess what somebody means, but that can lead to some really beautiful moments as well. On the 7th, as we were talking about, we have Saturn moving into Pisces. I'll spend some time with that today. And I will also, I think I'm going to be doing a Saturn and Pisces Q&A at the end of next week. I think because I got so backlogged with my live stream schedule, I'm probably going to skip the full moon in Virgo and just do a Saturn Q&A at the end of the week next week. And we can talk about the full moon in Virgo here today. Something had to go. When you lose a week of work, you have to kind of, make the best of it. But here we are. On the 16th, we have some really good news. Venus will be moving into Taurus, which is one of her home domiciles. I love Venus and Taurus periods. It's just a really great time to eat good food, smell the flowers, get good sleep, just take care of your body. It's just a really beautiful time for Venus. She's going to be gaining dignity, leaving her exile in Aries and moving into her domicile, her yin domicile of Taurus. On the 19th, Mercury moves into Aries, and which is a very positive thing for Mercury as far as it doesn't gain a ton of dignity, but it is getting out of its detriment. It's getting out of its fall. So it's an improvement by not being debilitated. And thank you, Ani, for your super chat here. I really appreciate you. They say, I picked up T. Susan Chang's tarot correspondences based on your recommendations. Thank you for offering us astrology today, Spencer. Yeah, T. Susan Chang is awesome. She was a great resource for that talk, and probably I would consider her my main tarot teacher. Like I have a growing library of tarot materials now, but I really like the way she teaches tarot. And I think that even if you just got her books, 36 Secrets, Tarot Correspondences, and Tarot Deciphered with M.M. Moline, and listen to her Fortune's Wheelhouse podcast, you'd be, way ahead of the game, because she's just incredible. She just released a blanket for the Nine of Swords blanket on her Etsy account. I want to kind of just show you this because I think it's so brilliant. So here's the Nine of Swords, and she literally made a version of this blanket that is for sale. I'm gonna have to pick that up pretty soon here, but it's very cool. So go support Susie at her Etsy. Look at her courses. She's really awesome. And thank you, Michelle, for your super chat here today. I appreciate you. Okay, so we have Mercury moving into Aries. We have the Sun moving into Aries, which is really great news for the Sun. This is our spring equinox. This is the Sun in its exaltation, just a return of vitality. If we're feeling tired during Pisces season, I think one of the things that we experience during Pisces season is really just we are trying to process all of the events of the last solar year. We're trying to get ready for a new birth. And here in the Midwest of America, we see the ice starting to melt, thankfully, and this fertile soup, this mixture of earth and water creating mud that will help feed the sprouts for the new spring season. So we're dissolving all of the concretized ideas that we had, all of the concretized feelings, and allowing ourselves to just really prepare. I would say it's a pregnant time. There is a pregnancy that we're trying to gestate something for the next year ahead. So we'll see the Sun moving into Aries on the 20th. And then on the 23rd, we have one of the really biggest astrology things of the next decade, potentially, with Pluto moving into Aquarius. And I'll break that down in depth when we get to the end of the month. But we're going to see some major changes in collective events. We had Pluto moving through Capricorn for quite a period of time. We saw a lot of changes to government systems and the way that we utilize our resources. And here we're going to see some challenges with technology. We're going to see some advances in technology. We're going to see some needs for collective responsibility for doing the right thing, whether it affects us individually or not, because we have to understand that the individual is a reflection of the whole, as above, so below, as within, so without, as individual, so collective. And once we start to understand that, we might be able to navigate the waters of Pluto and Aquarius a little bit more gracefully. Laura Burns is stopping in. Hello, Laura. Nice to see you. Hello from Toronto. Not sure how long I can stay. Oh, you got the baby napping. That's good. Yes, I'm glad the power is back on too, Laura. And I'm glad that you're here with us here today. Michelle says, I'm personally excited to have Pluto out of my first house. Yes, that's probably a relief, isn't it? I will have Pluto moving into my 7th house, just as Saturn is exiting, so out of the frying pan and into the fire, I guess. But yes, I would say for those of you who have Pluto moving into an angular house, 1, 7, 4, 10, yes, you might feel that experience more acutely, but it's a long-term process. It's not like, everything isn't going to change overnight. Usually Pluto spends enough time in a sign for 20 plus years. So you'll have time to figure this out. You'll just start seeing little hints of the changes, right away. I would say that there's been a lead up period for me, just experiencing some of the extreme weather events that we have in the last, 6 months or so. And I do think that that's going to be really a big part of Pluto and Aquarius is more extreme weather. And how do we band together as a species to figure out how to survive through that? Okay. So last ingress that we have of the month is Mars moving into Cancer on the 25th. This is interesting because we've had Mars in Gemini for quite a long period of time because of its retrograde cycle last year, and now we're going to be seeing Mars moving into its fall. So, I bet some of us are happy to see Mars leaving Gemini. It's heading into a place that it's not super comfortable in. Although we do have some dignity with Mars in the first few degrees of Cancer, it is in its own terms, I believe, and it does have some triplicity rulership in the evening. So not a happy place for Mars, because oftentimes what it will do is create severances and separations within our domestic situation or within circumstances that bring us security. So like family skirmishes and things like that, or issues with our home that need to be dealt with, which can be very stressful. But there's ways to utilize that energy or to adjust to it as well. So we'll talk about that at length. Let's see. Beth is here. Hello, Beth. 10 here. I'm going to stay in the flow and let it all move around me. I think you're referring to Pluto moving into the 10th. Yeah, one day at a time. I've had various clients and family members reach out to me and be like, "Oh no, what's this going to be about with this moving into my so and so house?" And I just have to say, it's a long-term influence. We'll live into the answers, and one day at a time, right? We really just have to take it as it comes. We can try to be prepared as much as we can, but if we try to stress out too much and have anxiety as we move through these changes, that can bring to us the things that we're fearing on some level. This is something I'm having to remind myself as I have gone through what I would consider somewhat of a traumatic experience. As someone who is quite a hermit, who doesn't really leave his house that often, having this sacred sanctuary be compromised, it was intense. There was a lot of intensity to that, and it brought up a lot of feelings within myself as far as like safety and things of that nature, and abandonment too. Like as you see people on your block have power and trucks driving by, that was the hardest thing about having the power off, was having the power company tell you that, oh, it's going to be on today, and then every sound that you hear, it's like PTSD, right? You're just magnetized to every truck sound that could possibly restore you and end the personal nightmare that you're going through. But in those moments, we have to stay centered. We have to kind of try to get our wits about us. We have to try to take the best possible action that we can in that moment with the resources and the circumstances that we have. So, just having grace for the people in your family when you're going through challenges like this. Like, Tanya and I were trying to be extra kind to one another, even though it was very stressful. Giving people in your life space, giving yourself extra space when you're going through these challenging events. And this is good advice for a major transit shifting into a different house too, or a major planet shifting into a different house, like Pluto or Saturn this month. Just giving yourself some extra space. I think that's going to be how we're going to get through this all together. Lynn is here. Hello, Lynn. Here late, just got out of Adam's class. Oh, good. Hope everything's going well over in Nightlight Land. CDP is here. I have Pluto opposing my 1 degree Leo sun. Just found out my grandpa has 1 year to live. Oh, I'm sorry, friend. It's tough when we get that kind of news, isn't it? All I can say is make the most of that time. I lost my mom last year, and it was very sudden. It was a mixture of like a deteriorating situation, but we weren't expecting her to pass. If you do have that knowledge that you have that amount of time with that person, I think it's really important to really just make the most of it. Be grateful for that time. But I'm sorry that you're going through that, friend. It's always tough when we know we're going to lose something, or that somebody that we care about. Okay. Solar phases. On the 5th, Saturn is going to emerge as a morning star, which basically means that it is going to emerge and become visible from under the beams of the sun. Oftentimes when Saturn emerges from under the beams, we have a whole new system that we're working with. We probably had some kind of chaos like we experienced here. And then maybe when Saturn emerges, we're like, okay, now we understand what the responsibilities that we have are moving forward, and here's what we're going to do moving forward. Like in our case, we need to really reevaluate our emergency plans. We were taking donations for a generator. We're probably going to be looking into getting that very, very soon, and having a backup plan, having an emergency plan. In your life, with Saturn emerging from the beams, you might see something that helps you to understand what you need to do to organize your life and take responsibility for the things that may be out of your control on some level, right? How can you step up and do the things that are presented to you that you may not have chosen? So that's going to be on the 5th. We are going to have the Sun conjoining Neptune on the 15th at 25 degrees Pisces. We'll talk about that. Mercury is going to be cazimi in Pisces at 26 degrees Pisces on St. Patrick's Day, the 17th of March. So that's interesting, like a Mercury cazimi with it being debilitated. We'll have to kind of parse that out together. And then on the 22nd, Jupiter is going to go under the Sun's beams during its evening set at 16 degrees of Aries. So this is going to be Jupiter going under the beams of the Sun to be renewed at its cazimi moment, which I believe is in May. I'll have to look at the dates here of when that cazimi is going to happen. I have it written down in my dailies here, but we'll get to that. Mars is going to be out of bounds all month through Gemini and Cancer. So we still may be experiencing anger. We may be experiencing, expressing our will in ways that aren't really in alignment with what has traditionally been socially acceptable. We may be, finding new ways to express martial energy. Sometimes it can be instructive, this Mars out of bounds, but just be careful about how you express yourself because it can get out of hand really quickly. The moon will be out of bounds from the 1st to the 3rd, from the 13th to the 17th, and then from the 26th to the 31st. If you are listening to this later and you want to know what happened for the last few days of March, that since we were a little bit late because of the weather, we just finished a Hellenistic void of course moon that started, I believe, on the 2nd. It was the first of the 2nd, I think, it was late in the day on the 1st. And that's basically when the moon is not touching any other planet by aspect or by bodily conjunction within 30 degrees and can cross sign boundaries, which is a much rarer condition than the modern interpretation, which is the same, aspecting a planet over 30 degrees, okay, but not over crossing sign boundaries. So the Hellenistic astrologers thought of that as a time when nothing would come of the matter. So the last few days we may have been kind of floating around and be like, oh, I feel like starting this, but maybe we shouldn't because it's just it might not turn out the way that we're expecting it to. The other thing that was really important about the beginning of the month was the Venus-Jupiter conjunction. And we'll get into that in a second just for some context, but that was in Aries. Okay, so hopefully that gives you the big picture. So here's what we're going to do first. Now what we'll do is we will talk about each of the decans briefly. And if you want to know more about the decans of Pisces, you can get that for 20% off in the store right now, as well as my stars and cards talk. But let's look at Pisces 2. So this is the card that is associated with the second decan of Pisces. This is the 9 of Cups. And here you see a figure who is loosely based on a figure in a play based on Henry IV or Henry VIII. His name is Falstaff, and he's kind of like a smug figure in this play. I've been reading this really great book that I highly recommend. It is called The Secrets of the Waite-Smith Tarot by Marcus Katz and Tally Goodwin. Really awesome book. Just gives you a lot of insight into what Pamela Coleman Smith, or Pixie, was thinking about when she was crafting these images. Here we have someone who is very satisfied. I mean, it's called the Lord of Material Happiness, or happiness, someone who is feeling fulfilled, a sense of fulfillment. Austin Coppock calls it the net, which is a reference, I believe, to Indra's net. And T. Susan Chang calls it fishes and wishes. This is a double Jupiter decan. Okay, so it is Jupiter in Jupiter's sign. Jupiter is the ruler of the decan, and Jupiter is the ruler of the sign. So it's very Jupiterian. It's very yin Jupiterian. And I would say yin Jupiter is the experience I have of that is trying to create order and connection and unification through our dreams, through our imagination, through our creative visualization. So this is kind of a, if you will it, it is no dream type of experience, right? If you can visualize it, it's easier to bring it into your reality and manifest it into your experience. There is a spirit associated with this decan called Dolos, and this is an apprentice to Prometheus. Prometheus, of course, was the god, or the titan, excuse me, that crafted humanity out of clay in some Greek mythology. And Dolos was his assistant. And one day Prometheus went off and was called away. And Dolos tried to craft his own human figure, but ran out of clay when he got to the feet. When Prometheus returned, he was very impressed by Dolos's attempts and put both his creation, which was called Aletheia, or truth, and Dolos's creation, Pseudologos, into the kiln to be fired and to be brought into reality. And Pseudologos translates to falsehood. There's some really interesting things we can parse out from that. Truth can run on healthy legs. Pseudologos, it may not get very far without feet, right? If we are telling a lie, we're telling a falsehood, if we're trying to present ourselves as more than we really are, eventually that's going to bite us in the butt and going to fall flat on its face. So I think that even though this is a very positive decan that the sun's moving through from the 1st through the 10th, okay, this is the experience we're going to be going through the beginning of the month, we have to be careful not to overestimate our ability. There's another story with this that's related to a fixed star in this decan at 15 degrees of Pisces called a Churnar, which is a fixed star in the river, the Eridanus. And it's related to the story of Phaethon, who was the son of Helios, the sun god. And he begged his father to be able to drive the chariot of the sun, to be able to prove his divine parentage, right? So people were telling young Phaethon, oh, Helios isn't really your dad. And Phaethon was like, prove it, Dad. Let me drive the chariot. And Phaethon was like, I'll grant you any wish, just not that one. But he ended up, he made a promise, and he allowed Phaethon to drive the chariot, and he wasn't ready. And he couldn't control the horses, the 4 white steeds that drew the chariot across the sky. And he burned the earth. He went too high and made it cold. And eventually Zeus was like, no, screw this. This kid's got to go. And he shot a thunderbolt at him, or a lightning bolt, knocked him out of the sky, and he drowned in the river. So there is a warning in this period of time, not to just to stay within your means, stay within your limits. Okay. Dream it, try to bring things into reality, but realize the limits of what is possible as well. I think that, Blossom Astrology says, Dad, can I have the keys to the car? Yes, exactly. So I think that the key in this first part of the month is, yes, dream. But then try to ground it in reality. I think that in my experience in the first part of this month, I've just gone through a traumatic experience, right? Where we were out without power and heat. And that can lead you to maybe trying to want to take some extreme countermeasures, like disaster preparedness, and oh no, we need to get this giant generator for our house. And maybe we don't need a $10,000 generator, but maybe we need a smaller thing that's more, that is more reasonable. Do you see what I'm saying? So you have to think about what is possible versus the best possible thing that you could be doing right now. I really do think part of the Piscean journey is surrendering to the reality of material incarnation, while also not losing touch with your spiritual experience, with your spiritual vision. There is the reason why this figure, I think, is satisfied, because he's accepted the reality of his situation on some level. I think acceptance is really a big part of Pisces, and surrender. Oftentimes I see with Piscean clients that have Piscean placements, they will have to release the how. They need to get in touch with their bigger long-term vision without dictating to the divine how it is supposed to happen. This is the opposite energy, the Virgo energy that's like, I have to have this system. I have to do this a certain way. In Pisces, it's like, you know what? Have the vision and then let go and let divine, right? That's kind of the energy that we're experiencing here. Following the Tao, following the currents of your life. And maybe sometimes the divine has a better plan, like sometimes you'll be like, oh no, it didn't work out the way that I wanted it to. But then you find yourself in a place that you never really could have expected, or you couldn't have even visualized. So leave space for that this month, okay? Especially at the beginning of the month. Yeah, Blossom is saying, make sure it's a Honda engine. Yeah, you're not the first person to tell me to not go cheap on the home generator and recommend those Hondas. So yes, I have my eye on something of that nature. So again, folks, if you want to make a donation to keeping the lights on literally in this house, you can set a super chat or a super sticker in the chat today, or buy me coffee at buymecoffee.com. I, of course, really appreciate all of you. And hopefully that'll just help us continue to do more astrology, continue to just have a standard of living here that'll help us have heat and electricity. Yeah. So that's the decan that we're going to be starting the month off with. Now, let's start looking at the kind of the nitty gritty. Let's zoom in even further here. Everybody doing okay? I have a new chair. I have my my medicine ball chair is finally, you can see me bouncing today. I'm kind of stretching as I go. So remember to stretch, remember to get a drink of water, because we're in it for a few hours here. But let's take a look at this astrology. Oh, there you go. Yeah. Yeah, donate or invest in the Decan series. Yes, as Blossom says, then everybody wins. Yes, you get the gift of knowledge, and I get the gift of heat and electricity. So thank you, friends. I love I've got hype people in the audience here today. So March 1st, again, we're already past this, but I wanted to contextualize it for you. On March 1st was the conjunction between Venus and Jupiter. So this was happening in the second decan of Aries, which is really related to being able to establish a royal decree, I guess you could say. In the first decan of Aries that we'll talk about today, we will be looking at how we sometimes reject what is not us to be able to individuate and to differentiate from the collective. And thank you, Laura, for the super sticker there. I appreciate you. So we are rejecting what is not us to be able to define ourselves in this second decan and say, you know what, I'm not that in the first decan, but here's what I am. This is what I'm passionate about. Here is my individual point of consciousness. The only challenge that we had with the Venus-Jupiter conjunction is that Venus is in her exile. So she isn't really in a spot where she's as powerful as she could be. And I've been advising people that there might be something very temporary that is very nice that happens in the middle of this week. I wouldn't build your life around it, but I would enjoy it for what it is, a temporary new start potentially. But again, it might not be a permanent one. I doubly think that because of the Hellenistic void, of course, that we were experiencing as well. Once the moon made its trine to, I believe, to Jupiter, it isn't going to touch anything for until today. It just ended, actually. So watch this. So I'm going to show you how this works here. So you can see the moon is going to hit Jupiter, okay, at about 12 degrees. Okay, there's the trine, I'm sorry, the square to Jupiter from the moon in Cancer. And then it's not going to be able to touch any other planet, traditional planet, it's not going to aspect any traditional planet. We're not going to count Neptune here. It doesn't aspect the planets in Aquarius. Okay, we're not going to count Uranus because we're utilizing a Hellenistic technique. Not that I don't use those planets, but I like to use the planets for the technique from the time period that we were using. And then it will go all the way until it makes the trine, which it recently did. If you look a few days later, it'll make the trine to Jupiter to end the void of course. See that? So it makes the trine, and then it starts aspecting other planets once again. So that happened at about 11:56 today as I'm recording this. This is another reason I just waited a little bit to do our live stream today, because I really didn't really want to do it during the void of course moon. And I also just needed a few days to like just get caught up and get some notes done. Like it was very hard to do anything during that previous period. Okay. So that's in relationship to that Venus-Jupiter conjunction, right? That happened basically during this Hellenistic void of course moon. You can see that now Venus is past it. Maybe it happened slightly beforehand. Okay. Let's see. Let's take a look and think about that for sure. So when we go to the first, we're going to have we want to see what we're looking at. I'm sorry for being slow today, friends. We want to see if Venus conjoins Jupiter before the moon. I don't think it does. Yeah. So that Venus-Jupiter conjunction happens after the void of course moon. So again, long story short, some temporary good thing last Wednesday and Thursday maybe, okay? But don't build your life around it. It may not be something that lasts. It's a little burst of energy, a little burst of something good. And maybe tell me in the chat, did you experience anything nice on Wednesday? Did you experience anything, a little boost of self-esteem or something beautiful that was maybe ephemeral, that was temporary? Let me know, because we've experienced it. Okay, as we move forward, the other thing that was happening Wednesday that I thought was really important is that we had Mercury conjoining Saturn. And honestly, this was the end of the malefic enclosure of Mercury that began right as my power went out. Like, I can't make this stuff up. It started Wednesday, the 22nd, and my power went out, and then it came back on like really this day, like March 1st, I think it was when it came back on, and right as Mercury was heading into the conjunction with Saturn. So this was a time where Mercury issues, communications, power, all of those things. Travel was probably very difficult during this time. The winter storms everywhere in the United States, there was a lot of storms that were creating a lot of travel issues as well with planes, and California got hit really hard during this as well. Parts of the plains of the Midwest as well. All sorts of stuff was going crazy. So really keep an eye out for these malefic enclosures. We've had some debate amongst astrological friends as to whether these were real enclosures because of the orb aspect. But I will say my personal experience, my anecdotal experience, most definitely was, because Mercury, like in my individual chart, rules my second house of resources, okay, which maybe could be your power and your heat, and the 11th house of groups, and it was very difficult for me to do my work. I had to cancel a live stream as well. So that feels like some external circumstance is holding something in check. So keep an eye out for those in the future when you're doing your examinations. And really, a malefic enclosure is when one planet is making a ray to one side of the planet. Like here, Mars was casting a ray before Mercury with the trine, and then Mercury was applying to a conjunction, a bodily conjunction with Saturn at 29 degrees of Aquarius here. Okay, so that ended around Wednesday, and immediately after that, Mercury went into Pisces. So we saw here now, there's Mercury into Pisces here. And a this is an interesting thing, right? Like this is where we had Mercury in a really tough spot in the malefic enclosure for a week. It was the malefic enclosure of the sun lasted for like 2 weeks because it was a little bit slower than Mercury. And we had the malefic enclosure of Venus that lasted for like 3 weeks before that. So thankfully, this one was slightly shorter, but it did seem more intense and more personal to me. And I wonder if any of you had experiences with that as well. Annie says, it froze in hell, snow in the desert in March, which is unheard of. Yeah, it's crazy. There's crazy stuff that's coming on that. Steven says, on Wednesday, I sold an art piece, Jupiter, Venus conjunct in my fifth house. Oh, that's cool. Yeah, see, that's like a really nice, you may not build your life around it, but it's something really nice like that comes up that is worth appreciating. Beth says, Wednesday was the best day. Sunshine, warmth, friends, exercise, and affirmation of my life path. Best day. Well, that's great, Beth. I'm glad to hear that. So that's cool, seeing something like a little event, a little blip of happiness. I think for me, my experience was just, oh my God, we have power again. Isn't this amazing? But my hands aren't going to freeze up. I will say the best investment that you can make if you want to have a disaster preparedness in a cold climate, get yourself some of those hot hands, hand warmers and feet warmers. That really like kept me from just like, I don't know, from my digits from falling off in the house. Those things are incredible. Well worth putting in your emergency pack. We did some crazy stuff too. I made like this really crazy terracotta like Potter heating element with like candles and Crisco. I was desperate because we even looked for non-electric heat sources at like 3 or 4 stores in this area, and it's everybody was sold out of stuff, and we were just like, oh, fine, I guess I'll just use a terracotta pot, a vat of Crisco and some candles and see if it'll radiate some heat out. And it worked okay, but the hot hands was the thing that I appreciated the most, I think. But back to Mercury. So Mercury in Pisces. Mercury is moving through the first decan of Pisces here, which is related to the 8 of Cups. Now, the 8 of Cups, we talked about last month, and we'll talk about it more as Saturn moves into this decan shortly afterwards as well. But the 8 of Cups is really showing us a figure that's going off into the wilderness, is kind of going off into escaping from the material success that they've had in the past. And Beth is asking me if I lost any houseplants. I did lose a couple houseplants, which was unfortunate. It's these really beautiful bonsais, and I had to, hopefully it'll come back. I have a little money plant, a pachira, that really was super sad, and I had to cut it all the way back to the trunk, and maybe it'll come back, or maybe it died. I don't know. But my bougainvillea bonsai was really, really upset too. But hopefully I didn't lose too many things. We lost a lot of food. I guess that was the main thing. And the bushes in the back were bent over with the weight of the ice, and we lost a lot of landscaping around the house, and our fence got like busted in half too. So there's a lot of damage on the property, in addition to some of those plant things. Luckily, my cats are okay. That's really the main reason I didn't leave and go somewhere else, besides all of the hotels being completely booked because there are 600,000 people without power here. I didn't want to leave my cats. Like, I was worried about them. They were looking pretty lethargic, and we just needed to huddle up together and give each other some warmth. So Mercury, can you tell Mercury is in Pisces? Our minds are wandering. So let's talk about the 8 of Cups. We're escaping from something because of a sense of dissatisfaction, potentially. It is a Saturn-ruled decan. It is something where we're feeling like, you know what, we didn't really achieve what we wanted to, or we did, and it didn't bring us a sense of purpose or meaning, and now we need to go off and maybe hear the siren's song of some kind of far off sense of purpose or meaning. It's leaving something to be able to find a higher purpose. So we may be seeing that in our Gemini and Virgo areas, where Mercury is asking us questions right now. Mercury is a planet that questions and throws things into doubt. So Mercury is going to be saying, hey, how do you find meaning? What questions do you need to ask to figure out what meaning that you want to create moving forward? And then Saturn is going to follow after and say, well, how can you make your sense of meaning real? What do you need to let go of to make your dream real? That's another part of Saturn and Pisces, is eliminating some dreams that just weren't practical, that just weren't able to be manifested, and finally just disintegrating them so that you can liberate energy to find a new form. I think that's a really important part of Saturn as well. So Mercury into Pisces. As we get into the 5th, we see that, again, just with Mercury and Pisces, it's a great time to double check your communications. Make sure that you're having clarity. Don't make assumptions. When we have Mercury in a place where it is like communicating or like screaming underwater, we need to make sure that the other party it was able to receive our message. Like I said, there's a lot of beauty that can be created with Mercury in Pisces. I have a number of friends who have this placement, who are wonderful artists. They are poets. They are philosophers. But sometimes the message gets lost in translation. And there's often times where we have to really just make sure that we're checking all the details. Because really what Pisces does is it likes to blend everything together. So you might think you've been clear about one detail, but it might have gotten blended in with a whole mess of other things that will create confusion. And you don't want to go through confusion, especially in America where we're heading into tax season. My recommendation is like, maybe if you can wait until Mercury goes into Aries to do your taxes, if you have that luxury, I would. Again, that's going to be on the 19th of March. But if you are doing things like taxes or that require focus and that require detailed attention, just take your time, double check, triple check everything. Okay. And communicate your compassion for people. I think that's another thing that you can do. What is Mercury drawing upon? Jupiterian compassion, Jupiterian peacemaking ability. So just trying to like communicate in a way that is taking into account your feelings is important around this period of time as well. Don't ignore your feelings. Communicate how you feel about people. Okay. When we get to the 5th, all right, this is Sunday. So now we've gotten past the time that we've lived through. Here is the future. All right. We are going to see Saturn making its morning, I guess we'd call it the morning rise. Okay. So or I believe it could be the heliacal morning rise. Okay. That may be the technical term. So you can see that there's a 15 degree of separation or distance between Saturn and the sun. Okay. So there is you could think of this as it being literally visible on the horizon. Let me show you what I'm talking about here. But I believe that there's another part of this that isn't necessarily tied to physical visibility. I was reading about this the other day, but I apologize. It's escaping me the detail of it. This is blame Mercury and Pisces if you want. But there was something where it was about kind of a philosophical solar phase experience rather than just the physical visibility. So what we're looking at is 15 degree distance, where now something's coming to light, right? Some Saturnian order is starting to form. Like it was gestating before. It was in the heart of the sun. It got renewed in the heart of the sun when the sun and Saturn came together a few weeks ago. And now we're going to see the results of that, or we're going to see the new order, I guess you could say, or the new blueprint starting to take form, and seeing it, being able to apply it in our lives. And this is really important because this heliacal rise, or this morning rise, where now Saturn is a morning star, where it is happier at it being rising before the sun, over the eastern horizon. That's called a rejoicing condition. This is important to understand the big picture before Saturn changes signs. I think really Saturn in the third decan of Aquarius is teaching us what we needed to let go of before we can really move on. I think it says, take a look at your life, really see how all the parts are connected, revisit certain parts of your life, but not permanently. Revisit it to be able to take with you the wisdom that you want to bring into the next cycle, but then to leave behind maybe the limiting thoughts, maybe the situations that no longer serve you. Again, we've talked about Aquarius as the glass ceiling on this channel, right? Where we can see the future that we want to create, but we may have a limiting belief around it. Okay, we may eliminate some possibilities to control a narrative to keep ourselves within limits at times. And those shackles are going to be released pretty soon as Saturn moves into Pisces. So this is going to be, once you've released that, then you'll be free, quote unquote, maybe. I don't know if are we ever truly free with Saturn? I guess that's another philosophical question. We will be free to concretize or bring into reality. And yeah, Ani is saying Seven of Swords. Good, right? That's the decan that Saturn is going to be making its heliacal rise in, where we are taking with us the wisdom that we've learned, and we're leaving behind the thoughts that aren't serving us anymore. There's also a daimon or a spirit associated with this decan called Osiris, and Osiris had to be reassembled to be able to mate with Isis to give birth to the next king, and then he went back into the underworld. He died again. Okay, it wasn't a permanent resurrection. So what have you learned from the past? What can you take with you? What do you need to discard? And then how can you start to make the new dream real, right? Okay. And what dream needs to die? Okay. I think that's, again, that's equally as important. Is some dreams are like pseudo-logos, right? Some dreams are like aletheus. They're based on truth. Other dreams are based on a falsehood that we tell ourselves, maybe an illusion, potentially. Okay. And those dreams, they're not all going to take flight. And I hate to be a party pooper with that, but you're going to be a lot happier, like Falstaff in the Nine of Cups, if you come to terms with the things that are possible in your life, rather than feeling bad that you're missing out on things that never could be. I've witnessed my father, my Piscean father, go through this in his life. Like, he's a Taurus rising, so he's just kind of like, he's fairly happy-go-lucky. Like if he has his like Star Trek or something and some good food and I don't know, comfort, he's fine. Like he's found peace through accepting things. I used to be really angry with him because I thought that he was not ambitious, if that makes sense. If you have Pisceans in your life and you mistake their ability to surrender to what is possible for a lack of ambition, I think you're making a mistake. Because as I've learned, as I've gotten older, it wasn't that he was not ambitious. It's that he knew how to surrender to the reality of his life, and that he knew how to find joy and peace within the middle path. And I have a lot of respect for that now. There's a lot of teachings in Taoist philosophy and in the I-Ching, especially about how the bird that flies too high loses its song. And I think that applies to Pisces season as well, is just how can we find that Jupiterian gratitude for what we do have in our life. Oh, yes, Ani, you're on fire today. Maybe truths come to light when Saturn ingresses into Pisces. I think so. I think you're right. And what to follow versus what to let go of. What's realistic? Exactly, my friend. Stevens is saying that Pluto and Aquarius will bring truths to light also. Yes, every planet's going to bring some kind of awareness, right? Saturn may teach us what is the limits of what is possible and what isn't. Pluto may talk to us about the what has been repressed underground and what has fallen into corruption that needs to be transmuted into something else that needs to be changed. I think Pluto is a change agent. Robert Schmidt used to talk about Pluto as a transcendental Mercury, which I think is really interesting because Mercury is the planet of alchemy. And I think Pluto is an achemical planet on a large scale, on a collective scale. So what collective alchemy can we start to create based on a form that needs to be changed from one thing to another, from a form that is no longer serving us into one that will be beneficial for humanity, right? And oftentimes things get worse before they get better. This is something that we've seen time and time again is we have to be aware of a problem before we can fix it or change it. And if we're not aware of it, it can just fester underneath the surface, underneath the ground, and then erupt like a volcano. There's all sorts of volcano metaphors with Pluto, right? Yeah, pressure making diamonds, exactly. Okay. Yeah, Stephen, the Pisces sun says I've been accused of not being ambitious. Well, I don't think you're not ambitious, Stephen. You're pretty ambitious in our chats, so, which I appreciate. I appreciate your Piscean enthusiasm and the Jupiterian joy that you bring here, friend. So, and my dad is he's a kind person. He's a kind soul, and I think that kindness I've learned to appreciate even more. As a young Leo rising, I was like, I want to be immortal. Like I need to be the best at everything. And I just could not understand him. And as I've gotten to my middle age, I'm like, oh, that's right. Okay, Dad, I see you. I see you. I see your wisdom. I get it. Like sometimes it takes a while to understand what our parents are really trying to teach us. Okay. So that is Saturn emerging from under the beams at the 5th. So I'm going to take an opportunity here to take a little stretch. I encourage you to do the same. I'm still trying to model good behavior here about stretching out our muscles. This was another thing that I realized when I was going through our ordeal was when you have like 5 layers of clothes on. Like I was just sitting in my house with like a coat, a vest, like long underwear. I had my snow pants on all day, like 4 pairs of socks on. It's actually hard to stretch your body out. Like so I didn't get to stretch as much as I would have liked, and it was very cold, so that adds to the stiffness. It was a very Saturnian experience. And to be honest, we've been kind of doing a Saturn, I don't know. Tanya's been doing some Saturn stuff for Third Coast Mojo, and we have Saturn set up, like an altar set up to Saturn in a corner of our house, and I'm curious now if Saturn just took over the house for a few days. That's fine, Okay, everybody stretched out. You get some water, get yourself a snack. You hanging in there? We're at about an hour here. I hope that you're doing okay. If you can do me a favor, friends, the simplest thing you can do to support this channel is hit the like button on this video and, share it with your friends. Make sure that you're subscribed to the channel if you're new here as well. And if you want to make a donation to the Generator Fund, you can buy me a super chat or a super sticker, or buy me a coffee at buymeacoffee.com, or do yourself a favor. Buy the Decans webinar series or the Stars and Cards webinar series and learn some stuff about the Decans and the tarot. And we can have even deeper conversations in these live streams. I know that all of you are seekers yourself and have so much wisdom to offer, so I always appreciate all of your comments. Okay, let's get back to it. What do you say? Doing all right? Everyone doing okay out there? Out in digital land? So, we are at the 6th of March. And on the 6th of March, we are leading up to our full moon. Okay, so you're going to start feeling the intensity increase as the light of the moon increases. We're going to have a sextile between the sun and Uranus on the 6th. So potentially some kind of unexpected help or beneficiary could come to your aid. Now, again, the sun is going to be very close to the fixed star Achernar at 15 degrees of Pisces. That is this fixed star that's associated with the Phaethon myth that we discussed earlier. So it is very important that you understand your limitations around this period of time and try not to push yourself too hard. I think Pisces season is a good time for rest as well. And as we get to the Virgo full moon the next day, we're probably going to feel a little bit, there's going to be a little stress involved with that potentially, as far as like, how do we balance out our need for rest and our need for work? How do we pay attention to the details when we're trying to visualize what we want to do or pursue next? So here is the full moon. And again, I'm most likely not going to be doing an individual live stream for the full moon this time, just because I would like to spend an entire live stream on Saturn and Pisces. And if you have questions on the full moon, now is a good time to ask them. But let's go in depth with this full moon a little bit here today. So we have a T-square basically between the sun, the moon, and Mars. So it's not a super tight square from Mars, and Mars is separating. So I'm not super concerned about Mars in this chart, but we will feel some tension between Mars and the moon and the sun by whole sign aspect. Now, the host of this moon is Mercury. That in it of itself gives us some challenges because the host of the moon is in its exile and its fall. You see that? So again, we may be trying to get clarity. The second decan of Pisces is opposed by the second decan of Virgo. And here we see the 9 of Pentacles, where we can really kind of look at this as a difference. But they're both figures that look like they're doing okay, right? You have Falstaff very satisfied with his 9 cups of spiritual attainment or whatever it is. Then you have this beautiful figure, this woman in a lush garden in the 9 of Pentacles that is holding a falcon. And she has the ability to weed the garden with this falcon, right? She's really adept at bringing things into form, right? This decan is really about how can you infuse spirit into matter, okay? And what methods are you going to use? What hard work are you going to need to do to be able to bring spirit into form? Austin Coppock talks about this decan related to the myth of Hephaestus. He calls it hammer and anvil. So to create something beautiful, we have to work really hard sometimes. And we may have to eliminate certain things. Virgo is a sign that is, and in turn Mercury in that phase is very good at identifying flaws so that it can eliminate things that are not contributing to the overall, work of art that wants to be passed on. Okay. So in this case, because Mercury is going to be in its exile and its fall, we may not be able to do things in the normally skilled fashion that Virgo is used to. Okay. There may be some compromises that have to be made. There may be more acceptance that comes in of imperfection, okay, that we have to come to terms with. Again, double check all your details around this period of time. That's really important. Now, Mars is square. Mars is in a decan that's associated with the 10 of Swords. And in that card, you can see a figure that has like 10 swords stuck in his back. And it is a solar decan in a Mercury-ruled sign. And it's the last decan before the summer solstice. And it really is a decan that requires us to make a choice from all the options that Gemini presents or that Mercury shows us. So in the myth of Castor and Pollux related to Gemini, one of the twins has to sacrifice some of his immortality so that the other can live. So we may need to eliminate certain pathways, certain imagined options, distractions. I think this is one of the ways to deal with this full moon is how do we finally just get rid of the distractions that aren't going to contribute to our grander vision, right? Because Saturn's going to say, how do you make this vision real? Like literally an hour after this full moon. Okay, this is something we haven't even really talked about. Look at this. Like, this is crazy. We're going to have the moon's going to become full. And then there you go. An hour later, Saturn moves into Pisces. So as the moon gets full, we're going to have to be eliminating some of the alternate pathways that aren't going to serve this Jupiterian Piscean vision that wants to concretize into reality through Saturn. Okay. Again, I think that we're seeing a trine too. I mean, here's something else that's kind of neat about this full moon. I mean, Mars is still out of bounds, so again, we could still be proliferating options, and when we really should be eliminating them. But you could see here, the moon is very close to has just gone through a trine to Uranus. So maybe you just need to do something innovative, different. Instead of getting so fixated on the minutia or the systems that create your life. Think about how you can kind of blow those systems and I don't know, blow them up is not really the best word. How can you take a lightning bolt of awareness to be able to try something that you may not have thought would be possible in the past, right? I think that when you begin with the end in mind, or when you can be able to take action with the clarity of why you're doing what you're doing, that can help you make more efficient actions. If you're just really like getting fixated on the little things before you even know what you're trying to achieve, that's when you get into trouble. My example I have for this is, since I have Virgo stellium, I was a very artistic kid. I liked doing art and music and things like that, and I liked to draw when I was a kid. I'm a pretty good artist. I wish I had pursued it a little bit more. I started in college, my degree was, I went for art, but I ended up graduating with a degree in creative writing and music. I don't know. I wanted to be a modern Renaissance man, which astrology has sort of encouraged that. Like, you really have to learn a lot of different disciplines, philosophy, art, music, science to do this work. And I think this is what I was feeling. But anyway, I used to be a real perfectionist about the work, and I would start drawing faces. I really like drawing faces, and I would start drawing an eye, and I would spend 4 hours on the intricacies of the eye. And I would erase so much that first of all, I would erase a hole in the page often. And I also, when I tried to draw the rest of it, the pieces didn't match up. Like, I'd spent so much time on that one eye, but I didn't really arrange the other eye in the right spot, or the nose was too big or something like that. And as I went and became a better artist, I learned that it's very important to put an outline of the nose, of the eyes, so that you know exactly where you want them to go. And I think that this is part of the balance that we're trying to strike at this full moon is, how can you have that sketch? How can you have the ambiguous but also all-inclusive vision that will then allow you to get closer into detail, that will allow you to take efficient action so that you're not wasting your time on an eye for for 4 hours when you should be seeing the bigger picture. Okay. So again, zoom out and then zoom back in and keep I think that is a breathing process. I like to compare that to the breath. Sometimes you have to exhale, you breathe in the big picture, you exhale the work and the details, or vice versa, however you want to think about it. That's going to help get you through this full moon. Okay. And it's probably going to be an awareness of how you do your work, how fulfilling it is to you. Does the work that you do actually bring you happiness? Or is it just busy work? Is it just a distraction? Like, is it something that really is a reflection of your true higher self and purpose? And before you have an existential crisis about that, we can find purpose in all sorts of things. Having a purpose does not mean it has to be grandiose. Sometimes we find purpose in being a good parent. Sometimes we find purpose in washing the dishes, maintaining an organized household. Sometimes we find purpose in exercising every day. So, there's old axioms of chop wood, carry water, when you have that monks would talk about. Like, yes, you can contemplate the bigger questions of life, but sometimes just taking care of like your everyday stuff can bring you a sense of purpose. Okay. Don't ever discount that what you're doing is too small. Okay. This is a mistake that I made when I was younger. I thought that I needed to do something. Like I said, I was obsessed with immortality. That's actually a secret Cancerian thing too. If you look at the story of Achilles, and there was a prophecy about him doing something that would bring him kleos, or eternal glory, but he would live a short life, or he would live a mundane life, but he would live for a long time. And his mom, who was a goddess, Thetis, wanted to protect him because she knew that he would die if he went off to war to achieve immortality. But I find some real beauty in the everyday now, and I don't think that we have to always. The scale and the size of the offering is not necessarily what's important. It's the intention behind it. It's the sincerity behind it. And that's really something that I think we'll be asking ourselves at this full moon, and when Saturn moves into Pisces in particular. Okay, I'm just looking through the chat here. And Stephen says, Saturn's been conjunct natal Mercury, 24 Aquarius. Thank you for Saturn for helping to filter what I think and not speak my thoughts aloud. Okay, yes. Blossom Astrology says, I've just taken up sketching faces with an emphasis of late on eyes. Well, Blossom, the best advice I can give you is, yeah, do the eyes, but make the context outline first, and put them in the right spot, and then do it. That's very helpful. Steven says, I went to college starting as a dual major in education and theater, education 1, and then I went to get a master's degree in education and educational theater. Oh, well, okay. So you've done all the things, Stephen. You're starting to achieve the Renaissance man ideal, the polymath ideal. Oh yes. Ani says, need the blueprint before we decorate. Yeah, right. You need to know what space you're trying to fill, what size it needs to be before you buy the couch, right? If you buy one item and then you buy another item that doesn't match, you might create some kind of clashing decor. So knowing what your color scheme and your color palette is before you start, putting individual pieces in is important. So these are things where we're trying to balance out big picture and small details. Lynn says this full moon will be the opposition to my natal full moon in Pisces, Sun in Virgo, conjunct both my Mercury and Moon. Should be really interesting. I agree, Lynn. That should be interesting. I'm curious to see how it'll play out. I'm sure I'll hear about it. All right. So again, I will go into further depth with Saturn moving into Pisces on the March 7th here is when it ingresses. I'm going to go further into depth on that probably on Friday or Saturday of next week. So we'll have a day or two of Saturn in Pisces to kind of feel how it feels. And then we'll take a longer, bigger picture leap into that. And I'll answer your questions specifically related to Saturn and Saturn in Pisces. I also recommend to you checking out a talk I did with Shu Yap of Inner Cycle Astrology. You can find her on YouTube, Intercycle Astrology, Shu Yap, Shuyap, who is an Australian astrologer who lives off the grid. A really good friend of mine, really nice astrologer, really just a good person, cool person. And we had a really good talk, hour and a half, 2 hours about Saturn and Pisces, and really did a deep dive into it. So you can find that as well. That I sent a link to that in my last newsletter if you're signed up to the newsletter as well. And I will probably send it out again. Whoops, that was my new chair making sounds. So that's the deal with that. Let's go on to the second decan of Pisces. Third decan of Pisces. All right. I guess just my main thoughts with Saturn and Pisces, if you want a preview, you may feel a sense of discontent when Saturn first moves into Pisces. It is a Saturn ruled decan, and we do sometimes need to feel a sense of dissatisfaction before we make major changes in our life. And if you allow yourself to sit with those feelings rather than try to like wish them away or spiritually bypass them, you'll have a better result that'll come later. Okay, like it's very important to sit with our own feelings of like, you know what, this isn't working, and really acknowledging that is really, it's a form of honesty. It's spiritual honesty. I really am turned off by some of the spiritual community that really tries to always like every single thing has to have some kind of silver lining, positive thing. And I tend to be a fairly optimistic person myself, but I am a realist at heart. And I think that when you sit with a feeling, a negative feeling, you'd be amazed at what insights that can bring you, at what changes you may be inspired to make by sitting with that feeling of acknowledging that you are not happy. I think that there's going to be a lot of people in the next few months, weeks ahead, that are going to be like, you know what? I'm tired of doing this the way that I'm doing this. This isn't working. Maybe I need to go off and figure out what really will work for me. I need to get back in touch with my heart because this isn't a reflection of it, right? Those are the questions that could be coming up when Saturn moves into first decan of Pisces. And Austin talks a lot about this card, and this decan is the labyrinth, right? If you want a really great meditation on that, go watch the David Bowie movie, The Labyrinth. There's all sorts of themes that you could pull out for Saturn and Pisces with that. And also The Matrix. Both of those movies, I think, really reflect Saturn and Pisces, and The Shawshank Redemption. I talked about all of these with Shu, and I'll talk more about them as we do our Q&A. But you could see Andy Dufresne in The Shawshank Redemption being imprisoned, Saturn, but also finding a sense of peace. He always stayed true to his dream of escaping, and he was willing to take the long-term viewpoint. Spoiler alert, if you haven't seen that movie, he digs his way out of prison over decades. So this might be, that's his dream. And he was willing to like take a little spoon and dig out a little dirt every day to achieve that dream. Okay. And that might be what we have to do when Saturn's in Pisces. We may have to get out our metaphorical spoons and dig a little bit of dirt out of the wall each day. You want to make that dream real? Show up. Do just enough for that day, and then show up again the next day and do what you can do that day, and then show up again. If you just put like one big effort and then don't put any effort afterwards, oftentimes those dreams will fail. Consistency is key, I think, and recognizing your limitations. Consistency does not mean that you have to put the exact same amount of energy into something every day. Sometimes your body says, it's time to rest. I just can't do this today. And that may be what you need. But then once you've had your rest, pick up the spoon again and keep at it, right? I think that's the thing. When we listen to our bodies, when we listen to our need for rest versus our need to take action, we're going to take better actions when we pay attention to that. You may also find that less is more. Oftentimes, this is something I'm having to learn, and you probably will see this as we move forward in Saturn and Pisces. I have a Virgo stellium. To me, more is more. Like more details, longer live streams, more books. And I think with Saturn opposing that, I can already feel myself reaching some of the limits of what I can do in the time that I have. And so I may have to shift some things about what I do and the way that I do it, the form, to maintain the essence of what I want to do. And the essence of what I want to do, friends, is two things. First and foremost, on a very selfish level, I want to keep learning. I want to keep studying. I want to explore. I'm an explorer at heart. And second of all, I want to keep sharing what I explore in hopes that it helps you, in hopes that it brings you some clarity and it brings you some peace. And it doesn't matter how I do that, but that's the core of what I'm doing. And that's the core of my desire to do what I do. So, and also in very practical terms, I need to make a living doing this too. So those are also the reality check of Saturn. And how do all of those three things balance out? Me learning, me helping other people, and me supporting myself as this is my career and my job. So you may have to be asking yourself those questions and trying to figure out what the balance is between all of those and what you are capable of and what you may have to let go of to do the best job that you can with the resources and the time that you have. All right. We'll talk about that more next week. Sound good? Anybody have any questions about Saturn before I move on from that? Because it is a big transit. I mean, Saturn's going to be in Pisces for a couple years here. It's going to retrograde this year. It's not going to dip back into Aquarius again. It's going to stay in Pisces. We often see, this kind of like explosion of new art and music, and oftentimes it's very stripped down, sort of like the grunge movement in the 90s. Sometimes it's really innovative. There's a period of time, I believe, like 1964 to 1967 was another Saturn and Pisces time period. Think of all the music that came out, the Beatles, the Beach Boys, Jimi Hendrix, all this stuff was just landing on our plate and be like, oh my God, this is a whole new crazy sound, right? Art, movies, just all sorts of really innovative stuff that where a dream became real. But also releasing illusions too. I mean, that's the 60s, we can idealize them, but they were a tumultuous time from what I've learned historically. And there was a lot of challenges with, trying to work through the racism that we had in this country, the wealth inequality, how we participated in global events like Vietnam and things like that. There was a lot of tension in a lot of areas in the 60s, and we can glamorize it through the art, but there's also stuff that it was difficult that we were dealing with. Okay. Ani says, I can't wait for the art. Might get nostalgic and go back to the early 90s playlist or the 60s. Yeah. I'll tell you what, friends, the hardest part of I've been joking that I went on my own Aaron Rodgers darkness retreat. If you don't know who Aaron Rodgers is, he's a quarterback for the Green Bay Packers, kind of an eccentric dude who to gain clarity on whether he should return to his team, seek a trade, or retire, he went on this 4-day darkness retreat, which maybe it's cool. I don't know. He had heat, so that was a little better for him. But I was joking. I went on my own darkness retreat, right? And the hardest part of that was not having music in my life. Like I was trying to conserve my phone battery and not have my internet radio on the whole time because it takes up a lot of battery. And that was really tough. I realized how much I really appreciated just having music and art and things, and being able to talk to people and things like that. Those are the things that fill me up. And having that silence was really difficult, and it makes you confront a lot of things. But I realized how much music can enhance and enrich what we're doing. And yes, there's so much great music in the 60s, and I'm a child of the 90s. I was a teenager in the 90s, so I have a soft spot for a lot of that music as well. So, okay, let's move on to the third decan of Pisces. Everybody doing okay? Do me a favor at this point. If you haven't already, please like the video, subscribe to the channel. If you want to make a donation to the work I'm doing here, which is, I prepare a lot of work for these things. If you want to keep the lights on here, and you can buy me a super chat or super sticker, and that's always appreciated. Yeah, let's talk about Pisces 3. Stephen is opening the Kurt Cobain can of worms, which we've talked about that a lot with Shu in that talk, and I'll talk about that more next week too. It says, the day Kurt Cobain passed, I remember I was driving home from community college. I had to pull over. It hit me really hard. Yeah, I remember that day that Kurt Cobain passed too. I know where I was too. I wasn't in my 20s, but I think I was like 13 or 14. And I remember sitting, I think it was during summer vacation. And I was at my grandma's house watching MTV, and they came on the news, and like, what was that DJ or VJ, Kurt something, came on and said that he had committed suicide. And I remember that moment. It's burned into my brain. That was a tough moment, because he was kind of a symbol of like that whole musical movement on some level. And that was definitely a reality check for that Saturn and Pisces period, the death of a dream on some level. Okay, so let's talk about the third decan of Pisces. We've talked about the second decan. We've talked a little bit about the satisfaction of that Jupiterian decan. We have this cycle where we go Saturn. There's a Saturn decan in a Jupiter sign, Jupiter in a Jupiter sign, and then we get to the, where is it? Of course I didn't pull that card. There it is. Then we get to the Mars decan. Okay, Saturn, Jupiter, Mars, Chaldean order, descending Chaldean order. Now, that's interesting, isn't it? Since we have the 10 of Cups, which looks like a very hopeful and joyful card with a rainbow, with maybe a happy family underneath, celebrating something. But this is a Mars card. This is one of there are two decans back to back, the Piscean decan, the last decan of Pisces, and then the first decan of Aries. Both are ruled by Mars, which is kind of interesting in and of itself. But this is, what are you willing to fight for? What are you willing to sacrifice for your dream? Okay, you've got this discontent, unification with your vision and what is possible, and then you got to take action on it, or you have to like fight for it. There's crusading energy. There's religious zealotry that is associated with this third decan of Pisces, and we have to be careful of that. We have to be careful. I would say that oftentimes the Piscean energy is characterized as martyrdom in modern astrology. And I think that if I were to pinpoint a place in the zodiac where that might be possible, it would be this third decan of Pisces, where we are thinking about what we are going to sacrifice, ourself or our energy, and is it worthy of our sacrifice? So if you have planets in the third 10-degree section of Pisces, between 20 degrees Pisces and 1 degree Aries there, or 0 degrees Aries, I should say, you may feel a desire to sacrifice yourself or your energy for a cause. And you have to be very careful to choose that cause wisely. Oftentimes there are people that will try to take advantage of your energy that don't deserve it. And oftentimes there is a challenge of boundaries in this sign, because again, this is the spring thaw. in the Northern Hemisphere. It's a lack of boundaries. It's a specific lack of boundaries so that we can unify a vision to be able to come together to do something important. But we have to be careful that we're not unifying with soil that is toxic, right? So let's say that you're trying to plant a garden and you have this vision and you're combining water with soil. You want to make sure that soil is healthy. Let's say you are the water in Pisces and the cause that you're sacrificing for is the earth. You want to make sure that that earth is going to support something moving forward, that it's not going to, grow something that, you'll later regret potentially, or that won't be healthy for you. So be careful of the people in your life around this period of time, if you have those placements or in general that may seek to take advantage of your compassion and your energy. Set healthy boundaries with people. Sometimes sacrifice is necessary, sometimes it's not. Okay, sometimes you may, you don't have to completely fall on the sword, right? I think that oftentimes you need to find the balance of how can you take care of yourself so that you have something to give. This is something I've observed in my Piscean friends and family, is oftentimes they'll give to the point where they're just completely wrung out. They're like an empty sponge. And then what they have to give after that is of much lower quality because they haven't been practicing the self-care that can, help them be helpful. So help yourself so that you can help others, if that makes sense. The other thing about this decan is it tends to relate to emotional extremes. There's a spirit in this decan called Elpis, which roughly translates to hope. And that is related to the story of Pandora. Pandora was sent to humanity by Zeus to punish them for stealing fire, like Prometheus stealing fire and giving it to humanity. And Pandora had this box where she unleashed all the ills that we experience as humans onto the earth, old age, sickness, illness, death, all those things. Humanity hadn't experienced that beforehand. So we may feel overwhelmed by the emotional challenges of being incarnated into a body in the last 10 degrees of Pisces. We may feel the depths of despair. We may also conversely feel the elation of some kind of spiritual union, right? Where we finally have achieved some kind of special purpose, right? Okay. So I think that the key is balance. We don't want to get too high. We don't want to get too low. We want to take that middle path like Mike Michaud was trying to teach Lil Spence as a young person, trying to find the middle way. And I think that will help you find your emotional center and your stability. You might also find clarity about what your why is during this decan. And that in turn can lead to the first decan of Aries, which will help us to understand how we want to take action on that passion that we have brought to our consciousness, right? That why can help inform the next actions that we need to take. We unify with the divine in the Pisces decans, and then we separate to individuate and then infuse that spirit into a body through Taurus. So connect with the collective Pisces, separate from the collective, have an individual purpose and individual consciousness, infuse that consciousness into something physical in Taurus. See how we're kind of going through this cycle here? Okay. So let's take a look at some of the astrology that we're going to be experiencing. We'll share our screen once again. Okay. Now we are looking at the time period between March the 10th and March 20th. Okay, we got past the really big day, which was the 7th with the full moon and Saturn moving into Pisces. Now we're kind of making sense of it, right? So you can see here, we've got the sun moving into the third decan of Pisces, 20 degrees Pisces, and it's immediately going to start applying to a conjunction to Neptune. So doubly like crusader energy, doubly trying to like figure out a sense of purpose to be able to surrender to. So I guess just be very careful of that. It can lead to a dissolving of the personal ego in service of something higher than yourself, which can be really beautiful. It can also be really toxic if you chose the wrong cause. Okay. So on the 11th, we just have a couple minor aspects that we'll be experiencing. We have Venus at 23 degrees of Aries, making a sextile to Mars. So again, we might be able to find the ability to communicate our passion and enthusiasm to win someone over to our perspective during this period of time. The third decan of Aries is related to a spirit called Eros, which ignites people's passions. So having conversations with people that ignite their passions through conversations that will maybe even help us eliminate some options that aren't realistic and win them over to our side. Like there may be something really interesting that happens that's temporary as well. Like again, the Aries planets, it's an initiation energy. It is a starting energy. It's a passionate beginning. It's not something that's always completely sustainable. And we don't want to stay in those spots. Like we that's why we have other signs in the zodiac, so we can create a firm foundation in the next sign, Taurus. Okay. All right. Just saying hi to a few people stopping in today. Michelle is joining us today. Hello, Michelle. We have Susan Mingo stopping in from Gig Harbor, Washington. Hello, Susan. Nice to see you, friend. Okay. So we have a sextile between Venus and Mars. We also have a sextile that day between Mercury in Pisces and Uranus in Taurus. So two sextiles, two minor benefic aspects where we may be having a passionate conversation, Venus, Mars, Aries, Gemini. And also, we may be having to communicate in a way that is unique. We may be communicating about resources because of the Uranus being in the second decan of Taurus, which is related to like giving and receiving benefits. Again, Mercury is going to be very close to that fixed star Achernar, which, amongst other things, is related to maybe the Phaethon myth. On a mundane level, Achernar is related to like crises, like or having calmness in a crisis, like floods, natural disasters are related to that fixed star. So I guess we'll keep an eye out for that. But again, try to reel in your ambitions around this period of time and figure out what is possible so that you can increase your chances for success. So that's the 11th. So we move on to the 14th. First of all, the moon is going to start to be out of bounds again from the 13th to the 17th. So just keep an eye on that. This is where a period of time where we can feel overly emotional, where our bodies may be feeling a little bit out of sync with the way that they normally do. Maybe we're feeling fatigued. Maybe we're eating something weird. But just pay attention to your body around this period of time and make sure that you're taking good care of yourself. Alla Goodman says, hello, here from rural Sierra Nevada in California. Wow, Alla, I wonder, did you get snow? Are you in the snowy part of California that got like 5 feet of snow or whatever it was? I hope that you're doing okay out there. It's having a lot of compassion for people who are experiencing weather-related events. But welcome, friend. It's nice to see new faces here. So, moon out of bounds, March 13th through the 17th. On the 14th, we're going to be seeing the perfection of Mars squaring Neptune. So we're going to feel this for a couple days moving up to it. And this has been a whole sign aspect that's been active throughout Mars's time in Gemini, which has been lengthy. Okay. So, but here we're going to have this come to a head. Now, remember, we've talked about the third 10 degrees of Pisces as an awareness of what we might be willing to sacrifice something for, what emotional extremes we might go to. And now when we have it coming in contact with Mars and Gemini, here we have an overabundance of emotions meeting an overabundance of thoughts. So I think that this could be a time where we're feeling a little bit of like, I don't know, a little bit of burnout. I think when Mars makes contact with Neptune, what I've experienced is Neptune has a dissolving quality that is somewhat similar to Pisces. I don't use Neptune as a sign ruler for Pisces, but I do think that it does have some syncretizations with the sign. More so just in the fact that it tends to melt things, you know, it tends to alter states. I think of Neptune as related to like an anesthesia, right? It puts us down and puts us in a state of undifferentiated awareness with the whole on some level. So when you combine that with Mars and Gemini, if we tend to overthink things, that can lead us to maybe having some kind of emotional meltdown. So just be very careful not to overthink, to find healthy outlets for your emotions during this period of time. I remember there was a Mars Neptune square a few years ago, and the picture that I chose was a great white shark jumping out of the ocean, right? Like Mars was in, Mars being the shark and Neptune being the ocean. So maybe there's some kind of shark energy that we're experiencing around this period of time with the depths of our unconscious, or our collective unconscious as well. So that is the 14th. Simultaneously on that day, the 14th, we will be experiencing a square between the sun and the moon. So this is our last quarter moon phase here. So you can see, well, I'll put the moon at 24 degrees, and you can see that there's our exact square. Okay. So here's 24 degrees Pisces sun, 24 degrees Sagittarius moon. Now, what is the difference between the Sagittarian third decan and the Piscean decan? I think that we can get some information with this from the cards. This is why I love using the cards. Like, it's just a really great way to tell a story. So we have this happy ever after rainbow energy in the last decan of Pisces. That is the why of what we're willing to sacrifice for. Why are we doing what we're doing? Well, it's to achieve this happy ending that may be ephemeral. It's temporary. Okay. There's a little bit of a different energy in the last decan of Sagittarius. You could see a figure that's carrying a heavy bundle, a burden, trying to get to some kind of goal or finish line. So this is the last decan, Sagittarius 3, before the winter solstice, the return of the light, the return of the lengthening of the days. Whereas Pisces is getting us to the spring equinox, a point of balance. So there is another philosophical thing that we can work out with that is, you know, Sagittarius is aspiring towards ascension, right? It's doing the hard work to complete something so that we can start rising again. Whereas Pisces is getting us to the point where we can find a place of balance so that we can, again, become more ambitious with the sun still climbing. But again, I think it's balance versus a new beginning. So we may be carrying a heavy burden around this last quarter moon. We may be just feeling a little bit exhausted. We're doing the hard work necessary to achieve a very important and cherished emotional dream. And we have to be real careful with the moon squaring not only the sun, but Mercury and Neptune as well. I think that there is a danger around this period of time of trying to do too much. I know that every time I've tried to force things during a Piscean transit, uh, my body just doesn't, it's just like, nope, this isn't, you're not in alignment with the time, buddy. Like, this is a time for rest and for visualization. The time for action is coming. You just have to be patient. The active time is the spring equinox. That's the time to launch the thing. This is the time to get really clear about what your dream is, and to see all the possibilities, and really connect with it in your heart. So put down a few of the sticks around this period of time, right? Release a few of the burdens so that you can truly get in touch with your heart center. Now, when we get to the 15th, everybody doing okay here? We're at about the 2-hour mark here. It's been nice to connect with all of you today. I missed talking with you. I really enjoy chatting with those of you in the community here. I made a lot of nice friendships through this work and this channel, and through the various social media channels that I'm active on. I post mostly on Instagram for just my personal stuff, and post some things that are astrology based. I post some announcements. I post cat stuff. Like, I like cats, or just little silly things. I've been posting a few silly things lately. Some mashups. I was told by my partner that mashups are like a millennial thing that's not cool anymore, and I'm saddened by that, because I posted a mashup of Metallica's One and A Land Down Under by Men at Work, and I thought it was pretty funny. But I guess that might make me unhip, but so it goes. Also, I want to say, forgive me for a small tangent here, the deepfake technology is starting to get crazy. Like, I was seeing another voice actor that was doing like Arnold Schwarzenegger things, where he put Arnold Schwarzenegger's face on like famous movie scenes, like the scene from Titanic where Jack has to draw the girl as one of his French girls, and then the face is Arnold Schwarzenegger. And I posted one where Ace Ventura had Ted Lasso's face. I mean, it's hilarious, but it's also like kind of horrifying how good that technology is getting. And I think that is going to be another thing we're going to have to wrestle with Saturn and Pisces and Pluto and Aquarius, is what is real? What is illusion? What is our technology trying to teach us? And what is our technology? Is it, there's all sorts of ways that technology can be abused, right? If you can put your face on someone else's body without, and mimic their voice, it's hard to really know what is a real, vision of something, or it's hard not to question your reality when that happens. And that's an uncomfortable place. That doesn't bring our inner child peace. The young part of us wants something we can count on. It wants security on some level. And when we can't trust the things and the people in our life, that makes us feel very unsafe. And I think that we've seen a lot of that in recent times, where a lot of us are feeling unsafe because we can't trust things around us. And I wonder how we reestablish that trust between each other, and between ourselves and the collective, ourselves and our governing bodies. Like, at its best, a government is something that serves the people, right? Like, it is the people. But we've had this disconnect between governments and, things like healthcare systems, with the environment. How do we reestablish that trust? I think is going to be a big question with Saturn moving into Pisces and Pluto moving into Aquarius. Okay, so the 15th, we have the Sun-Neptune conjunction. This could be really beautiful. I mean, it could be something where there's just, I wouldn't push yourself too hard. You might feel a little bit like spacey, but that could lead to something wonderful. think this could be a time to watch a movie or lose yourself in a land of enchantment, as Tanya and I like to say. Tanya and I connect over movies, and I think that we haven't been in a movie theater since the pandemic started. And to be honest, we really, really miss it. And I think that, there are ways to go to do that and create that in your home at this point, but there is something special about a movie theater, or there was. And Sun, Neptune coming together, it could be a time to just really practice a little bit of healthy escapism potentially within reason. You have to be careful. Like the way I'd look at escapist stuff, whether it's movies, video games, or books, or art, or I don't know, for those of you who experiment with drugs or things like that, I don't really go down that path, because I've had experiences when I was very young where I don't have the right type of constitution to be able to deal with that. Like my body just can't handle um, substances. And I almost died once when I was a teenager from alcohol poisoning. And I just really am very careful about what goes into my body after that experience. But what I will say about that is that reality and vision, this whole talk is about balance, really. When you go too far afield in escapism, what tends to happen is your physical reality tends to disintegrate. Okay, you don't bathe, you don't feed yourself, you're not getting enough sleep. If you like, let's say I used to play video games when I was in high school. I really loved this game, Final Fantasy VII, and this was the last video game that I really played seriously. And it was like my first year of college that I finished it. And I woke up one day and I had been playing for like 2 days straight or something, and I wasn't getting my homework done. And I snapped back in that moment to like the reality of like, what am I gaining from this? And now I have to deal with the reality that I've been ignoring by going off into a land of enchantment. And that's painful. So I think that if we go off and give ourselves small periods of enchantment, whether it's through movies, video games, whatever it is that brings you into an altered state, if you utilize moderation, the snapback to reality will have less consequences than if you go to an extreme. Because then you have to deal with the reality of the consequences of going off and far afield, right? That's something was tough for me to learn. I was a daydreamer as a child. I would stare out the window for hours during math class because I just couldn't, math was boring to me. I know now that it is magical. But when I was younger, it just seemed so mundane. It didn't feel like it had meaning. I needed something to have meaning for me to have interest. I was really interested in English and mythology and like the symbols. And I know now that math, again, has beauty to it, but the people who taught it just made it so mundane. I wish I had a good math teacher that could show me all of the divinity in it. But I didn't. And at that time, I would stare out the window. And math is the type of thing that if you stare out the window during too many math lessons, you get so far behind that you're just completely lost when you come back. And I had got some really terrible math grades in my primary education because I would just be completely in a different reality. Like I have the type of imagination where I can be in a completely different place. And I will wake up 30 minutes later and I'm like, oh man, I haven't even been here at all. It's good for things like music. It's good for writing. Sometimes it's good for astrology, but it's bad for math, or for the math that I was being force fed as a young child in the early 90s, or late 80s. So again, this Sun Neptune conjunction with Mercury in the mix, just be careful about how you go off into that other world, and know that you will have to come back at some point, and that you want to have your ducks in a row. Like take care of your business before you go off into the altered state of consciousness. Because if you're just trying to escape something that is painful in your reality, when you snap back to it, it'll be twice as bad, right? And you'll be twice as is likely to have to deal with that problem. So again, I hope that that's helpful. So that's the 15th. Now, we have Mercury conjoining on the 16th. So 16th is another kind of big day. Okay, 16th and 17th is very active astrologically. Edwina says, I come for the astrology and stay for the chit chat and digressions. Okay, good. Yeah. Well, I try to just be a real person on here. And my brain goes in a lot of different directions sometimes. And I'm glad that some people appreciate it. So thank you, Edwina. We got to bring a little bit of levity to this sometimes too, don't we? Oftentimes astrology can be pretty intense. You know, I hate to like belabor this point, but I feel like there's two kinds of astrologers in the world that I don't want to be. Number one is the doomsday astrologer, where every fucking aspect is like like some sort of end of the world type of thing. I think that's super toxic. And then there's the other just type of astrologer that's like every aspect is this opportunity for wonderfulness and like spiritual growth, and you'll get a spiritual, piece of cake. Like it's not you're trying to get something out of every aspect. And there's a happy medium of the realist in the middle where, yeah, this could be a nice time that we should appreciate and find gratitude to. And yes, this might be a really difficult time that we may need to have patience and endurance through. And that to me is how you can relate in a healthy way to this knowledge and just to life in general. Okay. Yeah, Ani says Honeycomb Planner sent 316 to overflow. That's a good point. There's a lot going on in this day. So let's break it down. And then let's try to see how we can contextualize it together, because there's a lot of individual moving pieces. So here's what we've got. Mercury-Neptune conjunction. So not a great day for clarity of details. Maybe clarity of purpose, but not necessarily of like individual pieces of that purpose. So know that going in, that we're going to have a mashup, like that's our theme, of all sorts of different stuff that's going to be underneath a layer of spiritual cake. Sorry, I'm just trying to be funny now. More so like under a layer of like oceanic emotions, okay? Like under a layer of emotions and feelings. So we'll have to swim our way through this day potentially. Now, the other thing that's happening is that the sun is going to be squaring Mars, okay? So we just had the Mars-Neptune square, but now we have the sun making it square to Mars, okay? Now, Mars-Sun squares, those can be challenging. What I will say is this. All of these planets, the sun, Mercury, Neptune, Saturn, they're all in the overcoming square to Mars. So that actually is I would say, those planets they have the upper hand. So what does that mean? Well, I think this is heart over head, right? I think that we may be trying to overthink things. We may be getting angry because of all the thoughts that we have, the options that we have. We're trying to make a choice. We're trying to eliminate distractions. We're trying to eliminate pathways that don't serve us. And we're really just going to have to trust our gut and trust our intuitions at this point, especially with this big stellium of Piscean planets that are happening. Now, there's one more thing that's happening on this day that I'm going to have to back up an hour or so to figure out here, or to show you. Okay, because there's a progression that we're going through here. All right, so this is the square between Pluto and Venus. So I'm going to circle this so you can see it. So here's Venus at 29 degrees of Aries and Pluto at 29 degrees of Capricorn. This is a challenging contact for Venus This is something where we might have some kind of power struggle in a relationship. But I think that it's a conversation that could be really um, helpful, okay, and emotional. What I'm seeing from this is like we might argue with our partners or with people we care about, Mars squared the sun and Mercury and Neptune. And it may be over like trivial things, okay? It may be over like so many options, feeling overwhelmed, feeling burnt out. We may be trying to convince someone over to our side of the story with Venus in the last degrees of Aries. We may be bringing to light some corruption in the systems that we have in our relationships or in our lives with Pluto in the last degrees of Capricorn. It might be over money, it might be over how we deal with our resources or how we deal with responsibility. It's not just money in the third decan of Capricorn, the it's the things that we're committed to and how we delegate authority. So maybe we have too many responsibilities and we're getting overwhelmed with it. Okay. And because of this huge stack up in Pisces, I think that you all are figuring this out. It's that you have to let love be the guiding force here. You have to have a good cry. If you're having a conversation, don't hold back your feelings. Don't be toxic with your feelings, but surrender to them, right? Maybe not surrender to your anger, maybe surrender to your sadness. Maybe surrender to the disappointment that you have in some situation. Surrender to humility. Okay? That's really how to get through these few days, the 15th through the 18th, I would say. And remember also, moon is out of bounds also. So we're going to be feeling a little bit emotional. Probably going to have some tough conversations about resources moving forward, about how to mobilize these resources. Maybe this is a tax conversation. Maybe this is, in my household, we've been thinking about how do we protect ourselves against future power outages and what all of those ramifications. We're thinking about like, do we need to get a tree service out to cut down some of these branches from these old maple trees that I'll tell you what, maples shed their branches like crazy during an ice storm. They are the worst. Like the oaks are fine. That's the maples that are coming down. So are we going to have to hire an arbor to come out and trim these trees up? These are all conversations that could potentially happen around this period of time. But let your compassion for one another be the guide. And I say that this could be a fruitful, healing conversation because directly after this square between Venus and Pluto, Venus moves into Taurus, which is her domicile, where she's much, much happier. Okay. She's out of her exile. She's into her home. She's into a decan that's related to the Five of Pentacles, where you see two figures that are outside of a church. They've fallen on hard times. Now, I will say this card looks a little gnarly, but here's the deal. We have the exaltation of the moon in this decan at 3 degrees of Taurus. We have a Mercury-ruled decan in a Venus-ruled sign. This is a time for making plans. When Venus moves into Taurus, take stock of the resources that you have. Make plans for future fertility, okay? You may have a difficult conversation that you have to have when Venus squares Pluto and the sun squares Mars. But once you get past the emotions of it, once you get past the anger about maybe having a difficult situation, then get to work, right? Then say, you know what, here's what is possible, here's what isn't, here's what we really have to do to really get solid and stable. And then Venus is going to start applying to a conjunction with Uranus. So you may have to do things in a way that is very different. And that's okay. Change is okay. All right. Okay, let's see. Some nice conversations about teaching, classroom management going on in the chat. Oh yeah, Steven's talking about teaching astrology in the classroom. That's a tough one, isn't it? I've thought about trying to do that. I used to teach at a homeschool place, there's all sorts of challenges to that. Um, one of which is that it's a symbolic language, and in America, like symbolic languages in the traditional education system are sort of frowned upon. So it's tough. It's a tough row to hoe. And there's so many different ways to do astrology and to find meaning through oracular space, that to be able to what is the word I'm looking for? Standardize it is really challenging. And we see this even in the astrological community. Trying to standardize something is a fool's errand. And you could probably say the same exact thing for tarot. That's why Stephen was asking about certification earlier. And I don't really think certification for tarot or astrology or anything like that really matters. I think it's important to do your work and to do your homework. But I do feel that, you know, it's a, I don't know. If I do courses, I'm not going to offer certification. I guess I can give you a little thumbs up and a little sucker and a piece of candy if you want at the end of it, if that makes you feel important. But at the end of the day, is the knowledge that you're using useful? Are you finding truth with it? And is it helpful to other people? Is the system that you're using consistent? And I really honestly feel, I talk about this in Stars and Cards and being able to entrain ourselves to different systems. It honestly almost doesn't matter what the system is, as long as you're using it consistently and as long as it's helping to bring clarity to your intuition. Okay. So let's, oops, I stopped the share. Just for emphasis. Let's just stop this share for emphasis. Sorry. Okay, let's keep going, friends. Actually, let's screw it. Let's take a stretch break. It's 2 hours. Yeah. Let's stretch out. We've all been here a while. I need to kind of get my body moving again. I hope that you all are doing okay out there. If you want to see my new crazy chair that I bought, my new space chair, this is called a Sprong chair. And it has like a medicine ball, like in between the floor and the seat. It allows you to kind of move around at various points. So I thought that's kind of cool. So take this opportunity to stretch, get yourself a snack, get yourself some kind of libation, stretch your legs, use the bathroom if you really want to. I'll probably be here still after you're here, come back. I love the folks that are like, I just went off and had dinner and you're still going. Like, yeah, blame my Taurus moon on the midheaven. But hit that like button, subscribe to the channel. Forgive me for any get off my lawn old man rants that I go on today. I'm very tired. I'm still recovering from some of the challenges of the last week. But I'm so very grateful that you all are here with me today. And let's see if we can do some more astrology here. What do you say? Okay, the squat challenge. Yeah, charge your batteries. Oh, gold stars. Yeah, Beth needs gold stars. Yeah, so I want to, I'll backtrack off of the severity of my thought of that. It is important to acknowledge and have milestones in our lives. And, you know, I've got my college degree up there behind me. I'm not immune to wanting to feel acknowledged for the work that we've done. What I will say is don't get attached to those. That is a representation of the work that you've done. And some folks really respond well to having that physical representation of that work. And other people don't need it. Do you know what I'm saying? Other people know internally that they have done the work or they haven't. And you are going to be the one that knows that internally. No certification, no diploma, no external authority is going to be able to tell you whether you are going to be successful or not, or whether you've done the work. I know a lot of people who have gone through certain programs that are, I don't know, some of them are really great. Some of them aren't. Like, and I'm talking about just in general, not just astrology. Like, there's all sorts of like programs you could go through that at the end of the day, is it useful for you or isn't it? So yeah, acknowledge your milestones. If you have gone through a journey with someone, feel good about that journey and feel good about the work that you've done. But don't get attached to it and don't lord those certificates over people. Because oftentimes, you might discount someone who doesn't have that, who's really good at what they do, and that could still be helpful and help you find truth. All right. And again, the question of standardization is a really, really tough one. This is part of the reason that I'm just like, yeah, I could go get like I don't know, a level 4, mystic certificate from a various astrological organization. But at the end of the day, is it going to help me do astrology? I don't really know. Like, I feel like I'm the best judge of what I need to figure out. I've had great teachers along the way, and some of them have really pointed the way for me, and I'm very grateful for them. But on other times, it's like, trust your gut, right? Trust your intuition. All right, let's go back to the chart. I do want to say though that I do appreciate my teacher, Adam Ellenboss from Nightlight Astrology. I really enjoyed that program and feel very grateful for my time there and for learning from him and the doors that he opened, and especially for him introducing me to people like Robert Schmidt and the work of Demetra George and things of that nature, and exploring Vedius Valens and Mathesis and those authors as well. It is nice to have a community of people that you can talk these things through with, and I feel really good about that, and I feel really good about trying to create that for the people that I teach as well. Is just the ability to talk with other people and bounce ideas off of them. I think is really important. I think what I don't like is hierarchies. This is why I try in this channel to read your comments, to include you in the process. Like I'm very kind of anti guru, I guess. I'm not your guru. I'm just a guy doing some astrology, and if you find some truth in that, that's good. I of course appreciate you, but question your teachers too. Don't be afraid to offer something, an insight that you have found in your life, okay? Because you have light within you as well. You have inner knowing. This is a truth that comes. This is the tension that we feel from the high priestess, which is the knowledge that arises from within, and then like the hierophant, which is the orthodox gatekeeper energy. And there's benefits to both, but I think that we need to acknowledge both and not eliminate one for the other completely, right? All right. Yeah, Ani is in Nightlight Year One. Adam's programs are really great. He's a good friend of mine, so I think that he does really good work over there. And yes, he does offer certifications. And if you are completing a Nightlight program, you should feel good about that. I mean, I have some Nightlight certifications, and I'm excited about that. But the certification is a beginning. It is not an ending, is what I will say. Yes, Stephen says, keep studying, keep learning, and practicing. That's the best teacher. I agree. I think that it's very important to think of that certificate as a start. If you think that you've made it once you've got that certificate, that's when things start to fall apart, okay? Rachel says, I like acknowledging the lineage of teachers I come from, but I totally agree about the arbitrary nature of some certifications. 100%. 100%. So just think of it as a jumping off point. That's what I think of my time with Adam as, is he really initiated me into a lot of these things and was able to contextualize it through his experience. And then that led me on my own pathways to be able to explore and maybe add to the conversation, right? Through my Decan work and things like that. And it's just led to new discoveries. And a great teacher will help you to learn lifelong and will initiate you into something and inspire you to keep learning without making you dependent upon them. Okay, so keep that in mind when you're going through any program, whether it's, any of these programs, whether it's astrology or otherwise, that you can use those as jumping off points. Like I tell this to my daughter who's in college right now too. This is a start. This is not yet the end of your education. Life is your education. And you should want to keep learning and changing and growing throughout the entire process. Okay, let's go. Astrology time. Sorry for the digression. I'm getting tired. Let's look at the 17th. So here is an interesting day. We've just gone through the square of the Sun to Mars, of Mars to Neptune, to Mercury to Mars. Okay. And now we are seeing on the 17th, of Venus to Pluto, and then Venus moving into Taurus. When we get here to the 17th, St. Patrick's Day, we have the cazimi of Mercury and the Sun. Okay. Yeah, I mean, people are talking about nightlight, and there's a lot of nightlight students that are coming over and seeing my talks and things of that nature. I love nightlight. I think that they do a good job over there, and I think that having an accountability partner to organize your studies is really important. And I think that that was the greatest benefit I got from that program, was having a structured environment to be able to connect with other seekers regularly. And I think that alone is worth pursuing. So think of your why, though. Don't do it for the certification. Do it for the knowledge itself. Do it for the community. Do it to learn how to learn. And if you go in with that mindset, I think you're gonna get a lot more out of any of these certification programs in any area of your life. All right. So Mercury conjoining the Sun, cazimi moment. Mercury being renewed in the heart of the Sun at 27 degrees of Pisces. Before the cazimi, Mercury makes its square to Mars. So we may have another challenging conversation before we get renewed in the heart of the Sun. This may give you some new ideas about what your grand crusade or purpose may be. And this can help you to really, I hope, to get clarity. This stack up of planets does not feel like a clarity like issue, but it does seem to bring us a sense of purpose. We may not know all the details of how we're going to work something out with a cazimi of Mercury in Pisces, but I think that we may be able to connect with the feeling that's necessary to move us forward. And I think that if you go into this cazimi of Mercury in Pisces saying, I want to get in touch with my passion that is going to later on give me motivation to work out the details, then I think you'll be doing this aspect better and well. The other thing that's going on the 17th is Venus is going to be making a sextile to Saturn. So again, this is another thing where Venus is in the first decan of Taurus, helping us to understand what resources we have so that we can make a plan to move forward to create abundance. And when Venus is hitting Saturn in Pisces, again, we're going to have to utilize those resources in service of finding meaning. Okay, so Saturn may tell us, hey, this dream isn't worth pursuing. This dream is not realistic. Utilize your resources towards this dream if you want to make it real. Okay, or the other one. When we get to the 18th, we just have a minor aspect with Mercury sextiling Pluto. Okay, here is Mercury at 29 degrees of Pisces. This is going to be a similar kind of thing that we experience with Venus, but instead of a square with Pluto, we have a sextile with Pluto before it changes signs and dignity. So here is the sextile between Mercury and Pluto, and then on the 19th, there is Mercury moving into Aries, okay? Moving out of its exile out of its fall, out of its confusion, out of its underwater, mythologically based symbolic language area, and into the time that says, I'm ready to go. Like, I don't have time for your feelings anymore. This is what Mercury in Aries is saying. I don't have time for this navel gazing. It's time to get to it. Like, so there may be some impulsiveness that comes through with this. There may be a desire to individuate and say, you know what, I'm tired of marinating in the giant bathtub of collective consciousness. My fingers are getting wrinkled. I'm getting pruned. It's time for me to dry out a little bit and get to work. Here's what's important to me. Here's what's not important to me. I've found that this part I need to discard, and this part I want to incorporate. So this is one of the first of our stack up in Pisces to move into the first decan of Aries, and we'll explore that in depth in 1 second. As we get to the 20th here, we're going to see a couple things. First, we're going to have the sun is going to sextile Pluto before it goes into Aries, just like Mercury did. Okay, so you can see that relationship right here. And then those planets will be in a whole sign square to one another. Okay, so we're going to have a little bit of tension between Sun, Mercury, and Jupiter and Pluto over the next few weeks until we get, well, not weeks, for 3 days, until we get Pluto moving into Aquarius. That'll trip you up, isn't it? Because it's very close to changing into Aquarius. So one last little bit of tension before we have a big shift coming after that. The other thing that we're seeing on the 20th, before we talk about the spring equinox here, is Venus will be conjoining the north node of the moon as well, which is a point of increase. So all of those things that we were talking about taking stock of your resources with Venus and Taurus, those things are going to be magnified when Venus hits the north node. Maybe you will be increased at that point. Maybe you'll find out that you have more resources than you thought, and you'll be able to put them into good use and into action to create stability within your life. Now, let's talk a little bit about the Aries ingress, right? Let's talk about the sun in the first decan of Aries. I'm just going to pull up the Aries ingress chart. Now, this isn't something that I do as much as some other mundane astrologers, but it's a very useful technique to find out what's going on in a particular area of the world. So like here in my hometown of Ypsilanti, Michigan, the Aries ingress chart is going to be having a Virgo rising, right? With the sun in the 8th house, which could reflect how this season might play out for us as a collective in this area. And you could do this for different cities as far as, capitals of countries and things of that nature. This chart might be slightly different in like Washington, D.C. or something like that, but that can give you an idea of what's going on in America as a whole on some level. But let's stop the share for a minute and let's talk about Aries 1. Let me get a drink here. So here is the Two of Wands. And this card is a little bit controversial, I think, for modern sensibilities. Now, I want to make clear that I think it's important to at least understand what the context of a card was in its historical context, and then we can start the necessary work of potentially updating it to be more, in alignment with the values of our current culture. This card is called Dominion, and it basically shows someone, maybe someone like Alexander the Great potentially, who is looking at the world and thinking about which place he wants to conquer next, which territory he wants to conquer. There's some themes of colonialism that come up with this card that, again, are challenging for our modern sensibilities. And I think that we need to kind of keep in mind that this can be a personal conquering. This can be something where we are trying to initiate a new project in our own lives or a new state of consciousness. This card is ruled by Mars in a Mars-ruled sign. Austin Coppock calls it the axe. T. Susan Chang calls it the seeds of dominion. There's a daimon or spirit called Adonius, which is a name for Pluto or Hades, related as a spirit to this decan, which things that erupt out of the earth. So think about a seed making its eruption from the soil and all the energy and yang energy it takes for that little tiny sprout to bust through the earth. That's the energy of the first decan of Aries. It's raw, brute strength that helps us to create a new start. It can be, it is not subtle energy. Whereas like the Pisces energy can be very subtle. We can read into things. Aries is not subtle. Aries is like two rams butting heads against one another. And you might find yourself butting heads with somebody in your life. Because really a lot of the themes with this decan are saying we need to sever from the collective to figure out who we are. Oftentimes we need to create some kind of conflict or reject things that we are not in alignment with to be able to find out who we really are. And that energy is necessary. Sometimes conflict is necessary. Now, generally as a peaceful person myself, I often ask myself, how can we, fight fair if we do need to have a conflict? But I think that it is important to recognize that there will be times where if you want to achieve the dream that you established was important to you in the last decans of Pisces, you might have to energize and mobilize your energy and fight for it. I think dreams are not necessarily always just handed to us on a platter. Some things we can allow into our lives, other things we need to pursue. And this energy says, all right, it's go time. It's time to start planting the seeds. It's time to start, releasing the old stuff from the previous cycle. What do you want to do? What action do you want to take? And here's the thing. That decan of Aries, you have to be careful not to burn yourself out. You might want to do all the actions right away. I have a lot of Aries friends and they get really fired up about stuff. And I oftentimes that can lead to burnout. Okay. I love my Aries friends' enthusiasms, the Aries sun friends. I really did not understand that sign as a young person. I really was irritated by it as a young person, as a Cancer sun, as a square. Like, I was like, oh, settle down. Like, why do you want to fight all the time? But as an adult, some of my best friends have Aries suns, and I just so much appreciate their youthful enthusiasm, their intelligence, their like unyielding faith and passion sometimes in things. A lot of times people can get jaded and with life, and my Aries friends never get jaded. I have this friend who loves Michael Jackson, and he's an Aries sun. He can talk about Michael Jackson like he just heard it for the first time every day. Like I love talking to him. Sometimes he will get so enthusiastic that I'll be like talking to him for like an hour, and he'll be talking and doesn't always leave a lot of space for you to talk, and I'll be like and sometimes I'll be doing something else, I'll be like he's just still going off about, I'm sorry Fred if you see this, and you won't see it, but there's just something beautiful and childlike and innocent, but also fierce about that, and like I think that energy is very attractive as we age, and we want to feel that spark of youth. And this is what's great about astrology, is we can feel the spark of renewal in these cycles, even if we're heading into different seasons of our lives. And I think we can, even if we're aging, we can have that cycle of renewal. I mean, and this is the Ouroboros, the eternal snake eating its own tail, birth and death, that cycle that we, are still stuck within at some level. Okay. Ani says, Lord of Dominion, I have 3 planets here. Help. Like butts head with the mirror. That's funny. Oh boy. Yeah. Kobab says, it took my heart to be twisted before I felt it was alive again. Capricorn sun, right? Sun and rising, yeah. Um, yeah, if you have heavy Saturnian placements in your chart, it can be, sometimes we take on the mantle of responsibility so heavily that having like a Aries type person just that's like so excited about things, it's just be so refreshing, you know? Like, yes, we will be like, oh shit, don't run out in the street. Maybe you shouldn't do that. Like the cautious part of me is like, oh, I don't know about that. But there is something beautiful in someone who's just willing to try new things and willing to have that pioneering spirit. And I think we can all benefit from that energy if we learn to appreciate it in its purpose, right? Again, Aries energy isn't something that we build our entire experience around. It's a temporary start. It's the force that gets you moving. We're getting over inertia, and then we get into a routine in Taurus, in the transition to Taurus. So we've got this spring equinox here. It's kind of an interesting one because Mercury will be co-present with the sun and Jupiter. So we're able to utilize the resources of Aries in an achemical fashion with Mercury here. And we have a lot of enthusiasm with Jupiter here as well. Like a lot of like, yes, I'm ready for a new start. I'm ready to get moving on something, right? And we've got this Pluto that's going to be moving into a new sign very shortly after this as well. So one other thing about that first decan of Aries, and I talk about this in my Aries Decans webinar that you can find on my store. It is associated with a sephira called Chokhmah, and Chokhmah and Atziluth. And that's really, Chokhmah is like a flash of awareness. So in Aries period of time, we have a flash of inspiration or a flash of inspirational awareness. If you have Aries planets or if you have Aries friends, one of the most, I don't know, endearing things about you or your friend is that every idea that they come across, it feels like the first time, right? That they're so excited, like it's brand new. And there's just something beautiful about that again. Okay. Yeah, I have a lot of problems when people get too jaded about stuff. Like the one time I almost came to blows with someone about music was in college, where I had heard the White Stripes for the first time or something. And for whatever reason I was late to the party, and some hipster kid at who I think was probably, I don't know, I think he was in Aries or something. But maybe he wasn't, because he was over it. Maybe he was like he had some Saturnian things. He felt too cool for school. What is the too cool for school sign? Like but I was really excited about the White Stripes, and I was like, wow, this band, the White Stripes. And I was like, they're I'm tired of them. Like, and I was like, well, I like them, so it's new to me. Like, and I'm like, that's kind of a arrogant thing to say, or like kind of a. I had said something, I popped off something, and he was about to fight me because I dared, I had the audacity to like the White Stripes after it was cool to do so. So I don't know. But anyway, I digress. This is a very digressing one. Sorry, friends. The other things that I will say with the Piscean transition to Aries is that we have Mars now becoming the host of the sun. I think when the sun is in a new sign, it brings awareness to that area of our life. It sheds light on it. So now, instead of the sun being hosted by Jupiter in Aries, when it was in Pisces, it's now being hosted by that Mars in Gemini. And we will have a few weeks of that, or a little bit of time of Mars in Gemini, maybe 1 week. I'm getting my timelines messed up here. What is time, really? Right? Like, what is this? This is the Pisces season talking. What are timelines? 1 week, 3 days, 3 weeks. It's all relative. But we'll have a few days of Mars hosting the sun in Gemini, and then moving into its fall in Cancer, which is a really, there's going to be some tension with that, because first of all, the host is going to be in bad shape in Cancer with the fall. And also, it's going to be square its host. So I do think that our individual desires are going to go through a culling of options with Mars in Gemini. And potentially, then we're going to move into some tension between our own individual desires and our own individual projects and yang energy and the domestic environment that we're in and how we nurture others and how we want to be nurtured with the square between Mars and the Aries planets eventually. So when we get to the 21st, here is the new moon in Aries. So yes, we have the ingress on the 20th, but I really think things will start to really activate in Aries season right here at this new moon. Now, this is a crazy powerful new moon, right? This is a new moon at 0 degrees of Aries, right near the Aries ingress. Very powerful for starting something new. Again, you may be inspired to individuate and do something your own way rather than falling in line with the way that it's always been done or with the collective consensus. So follow those instincts, make sure that it's not destroying your more sensitive relationships with others, which could be a potentially a challenge once Mars moves into Cancer. But there is a pretty juicy, Venus and Taurus that we're working with. Venus is going to be working together in a harmonious sextile with Saturn. So see what happens. Try some things out. All right. Steven says he probably needed an icky thump, that kid who was too cool for school. That's funny. That's good. Like that reference. Yeah. Blossom Astrology says this is the newest moon ever. Yeah, right? Like life may not look the same after this new moon, because this new moon initiates, we've got the initiating energy of Saturn and Pisces, and then a few days after this, right, we're going to have Pluto moving into Aquarius. Things about to get weird, right? So we have this new moon on the 21st, and then very shortly after this, okay, we have Jupiter moving under the beams of the sun. So you can see here that Jupiter is now moving within 15 degrees of the sun and going under the beams. This is called the evening set of Jupiter, because it's not going to be visible in the evening anymore. If you put the sun on the descendant here, Jupiter would have been visible outside of that 15 degree orb, but now it won't be once it's going under the beams. So what does that mean for Jupiter? Well, Jupiter is heading into its renewal phase. There may be some parts of your life, Jupiterian ruled parts of your life in the Pisces area and the Sagittarius area or topic of your life that starts to shift, that doesn't feel clear, that you may be in the dark about it for a period of time. And then when we get to the Cazimi of Jupiter, okay, which is a few weeks later, we will see that's at 21 degrees of Aries. That's on the 11th of March. So if you're feeling some instability in the Pisces and Sagittarius area of your life, you'll probably get a real burst of energy around the 11th of April. We'll keep an eye out for that one. I'm excited about that one, actually. I'm really excited about it because it's exactly trine my natal ascendant from the 9th house, the fortunate 9th house. So I'm expecting something interesting to pop up for me personally, but I would love to hear your stories as far as how that Cazimi will play out for you as well. Just the rebirth of something, the birth of something new and exciting, potentially. Okay. So that's the 22nd. Now, we get to the 23rd. Oh boy, here we go, friends. Boom, there it is. That was so epic. It really wasn't, but it will feel epic. There's our friend Pluto moving into another Saturn ruled sign as it ingresses into Aquarius. Now, Pluto is going to still be hosted by Saturn. Now, I'm curious if it still works the same way as the traditional guest host relationship. I think it does. But we're conflating two systems in that regard. So we'll see. But we're going to have a period of time. I'll give you some dates here just so you can kind of contextualize this. So it's going to station retrograde on May the 1st. It's going to retrograde back into Capricorn on June the 11th, and then station direct on October the 10th. It'll go back into Aquarius as it is conjoining the sun in Aquarius on January 20th, 2024. Okay. So we're getting a taste of Pluto in Aquarius from the end of March to the beginning of May. Okay. Or actually from the end of March to the beginning of June, actually, because we're going to have some of that as a retrograde phase. And then we're going to have it, moving more solidly into Aquarius next year. So what does this mean? What are we dealing with? Well, maybe the cards can give us some insight. So we have the Five of Swords associated with the first decan of Aquarius. And in it, you see a conflict and a defeat. And oftentimes, in this Rider-Waite-Smith tarot book, The Secrets of the Waite-Smith Tarot, they talk about these pirates that were in a story. I believe Dare to Do, Catch and Fly, and then there's another one. But basically, they were these pirates that were trying to steal something from a giant, and things went horribly wrong. And there's these kind of three figures, one of whom is kind of the smug winner. One is going off into into exile and disgrace, and the other one's kind of in the middle. And I think that this is really like, what do we do when we experience a defeat or a crisis? Do we freeze? Do we fight? Or do we flee? Okay, so there's all sorts of things that we can do when we experience crisis. And friends, my intuition is that and this is not just intuition, this is like just common sense in seeing some of the patterns that have been happening over the last few decades, and in my own personal experience, and like thinking about it, meditating on it. I think the Earth as a whole, as an organism, is in a rough spot right now. I think that there has been an acceleration of greenhouse gas and things of that nature, especially over the last 100 to 200 years, that we have never seen before on this planet, as to my knowledge. And I think that we're going to see an acceleration of some of the fallout from an unhappy planet, from utilizing our resources in a way that is not sustainable, that is creating melting of the polar ice caps, that alternately creates, extreme weather events, whether it's extreme heat, global warming, whether sometimes it's extreme cold. I mean, global warming does not just mean, I love the arguments that people are like, I'm in the middle of this ice storm, it's global warming. That's a terrible argument. It's really just, it's extreme weather events. And I do think that we're going to have to really start dealing with this as a collective more and more and more. These events are getting more frequent. These events are getting more extreme. I think that that's one thing that we're going to be dealing with Pluto and Aquarius, is how do we deal in a crisis as a collective? We got a taste of this as Saturn moved through Aquarius with the pandemic, about are we willing to take actions for the good of the collective to be able to be responsible to one another. Some of us were, some of us weren't. And we can look at the people who weren't and get frustrated at that. And we can sometimes look at the people who really did some really great work during that period of time. I think it's both. But I do think that Pluto is a whole different, kettle of fish. think Pluto is going to say, okay, here is the corruption that was repressed. Here is how you're going to have to deal with that. If you didn't get it when Saturn was going through there, here's the repercussions of that. I still think that there's probably going to be more airborne diseases, unfortunately, like looking through history and the conjunctions and air signs of Saturn and Jupiter. I don't think that like this pandemic that we went through is the last one. I think that that's another result of climate change on some level, is that more and more diseases are going to be getting into the human food supply and things of that nature. I think that people have been asking about aliens and things like that. I'm not so sure about that. I don't have an opinion on that. I think that's a possibility. I think that I can't discount that there are life on other planets, and with the vastness of the universe, I would say it's probably more likely than less, but I'm not sure that that's necessarily how it plays out, but it could. That could be something that shakes us to the core as far as what it means to be human and what our relationship is to one another. And this isn't like the conspiracy theory channel here. Like, I'm trying to figure out these things in practical ways. I do think climate change is going to be part of Pluto and Aquarius, and how we band together as a society to change things to be able to survive moving forward. I also feel that like technology is obviously going to be a big part of this. We've gotten a taste of this with the artificial intelligence being part of our everyday conversations recently. I think that the artificial intelligence is going to exponentially increase in power over the time of Pluto and Aquarius. And if you've ever seen an exponential curve, you have like, I'll draw one for you because it's interesting. You'll have like this steady growth, and then eventually it just goes like this. Okay. And I think that we're like here when it comes to AI technology, and we're getting pretty close to the point when it's going to go whoop, like it's going to get crazy powerful really quickly. And that's going to change the fundamental way that we exist in the world. And there are going to be some things that are scary about that, and there's going to be some things that are wonderful about it. There's going to be some diseases that are cured. There's going to be some ways that we can unify with technology potentially to do all sorts of incredible things. There's also going to be a lot of questions about what does it mean to be human now that we are becoming more and more merged with our technology. What does it mean for, our individuality if we're becoming part of a collective hive mind like the internet has shown us, or like AI technology might do if we're uploading our consciousness into the clouds of tomorrow. I don't have all the great answers to that yet. We're going to live through it. We haven't necessarily lived through a Pluto in Aquarius time period yet. I'll have to do some more research about when it was in Aquarius in the past. But I think that from my very cursory look into it, many things changed significantly. I think we're talking about, let's see, let's do a little exercise here. This is, if we just look at some very simple dates, we look at, I believe that there was when was the last time this happened? So here is, we don't want any sign. We want the last time it went into Aquarius. So 1778. Like that was, so for those of you in America, that's probably this right after we became a country. There were some pretty important changes that happened right after that. Okay. We go back again into another cycle. This is the American Revolution, 1532. Wasn't this the Renaissance period of time here? Where we had some pretty amazing inventions in the mid 1500s as far as how we saw the earth and philosophically we're moving through it. So yeah, this is going to be a big deal. Okay. And I personally think that the issues that we're going to have to solve are really, a lot of it is going to be because of the extreme weather events that we're experiencing, and how are we going to deal with technology? The alien thing is a wild card. I could see it happening, but that's not my main concern at this point. If that does happen, my only hope is that they're friendly and that we can be friends. But there's going to be some parts of humanity, if that happens, that are going to be like, oh, this is fun. Let's try to make peace. There's going to be other people that are like trying to just blow them out of the sky. That's just how people are at this point. And this is how people are with any big changes. Some are going to embrace it and some are going to reject it. So take a deep breath as far as when Pluto goes into your Aquarian house. Take a look at the topics of your Aquarius house. I want you to meditate and think about how you might be able to play a role in the collective. What need can you fulfill through the topic of that house? Where are you going to be called upon to make significant changes and perhaps sacrifice for the good of the whole, potentially without getting a ton of celebratory applause for it? I think when we have things in Aquarius, we have to make sacrifices. We have to do what is right for the future generations, whether we immediately benefit from it or not. And there's going to be a lot of questions about that, because in late stage capitalism of the last 50 years, there's been this whole like myth of like, if you just work hard enough, you can get yours. And then, you've won capitalism. You see what I'm saying? That model isn't going to work anymore. That model has become super destructive. It's always been destructive, but it's going to become even clearer that that doesn't work anymore. And how are we going to convince enough people that, we're fed that myth as a young person to let go of it? Do you see what I'm saying? While they watch the people that have already gotten the bag hang on to those resources. And there's a funny skit on SNL that really exemplifies this to me. And it talks about, I think, really the Pluto and Leo generation, but it's more about the baby boomer generation. And I want to preface this with saying there are good baby boomers out there, and there are baby boomers that are very compassionate and think collectively. But the skit was making fun of the boomers that are like, oh, I bought my 5th house. Good for me, like, you know what I'm saying? Like it was a whole thing about the housing market, and the consolidation of wealth, and like, oh, we've made it. Oh, that's great, and I think that attitude is going to have to change, and that's a tough sell for a lot of people, but I do think that attitude's going to have to change, or everybody's going to suffer. This is something to consider with Pluto moving through Aquarius, is that, you will benefit by doing something for the good of the whole. An unhealthy collective cannot provide circumstances for healthy individuals. Let me repeat that. An unhealthy collective cannot provide the conditions for healthy individuals. That to me is the lesson of Pluto in Aquarius, and all the exposed corruption that will come from that, right? So how do we work with it? We willingly go into the cocoon of Pluto. I love this metaphor that Anne Ortley talks about, the butterfly going into the cocoon. The entire system is melting, like in the butterfly or in the caterpillar. All of his cells are melting into something to be something completely different. And sometimes it's painful, and they don't go into it knowing what they're going to become. They just do it because it's instinct, right? And we have to rely on our instincts at this point. Steven says, I will be like Matilda, a revolting revolter. Okay. I don't know exactly what that means, but I think it will, like, I like Matilda. I like the way she thinks. Ani says, Pluto in Aquarius is going to be even bigger than the internet, maybe even Jesus. Maybe. Yeah, there's a lot to unpack in that statement, Ani, but yes, I think that it is going to be an important transit. Ani says corresponds to the American and French Revolution, the last time Pluto was in Aquarius. Yeah, revolution is maybe another thing that we might see. Um, we have over the last few decades, the wealth consolidation that we've seen during Pluto and Capricorn has been extreme. The billionaires got much, 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 much richer than they were at the beginning of it. And that's just not going to work anymore moving forward. And eventually people have put up with it for long enough, and it won't work moving forward. And that's when people can't even just do their very basic things because people have hoarded resources and wealth. That's when the revolutions start. That's when like people get so upset that they're like, well, hey, we're about to take out an entire government or a leader or whatever. My hope, being a peaceful person, is that we can share willingly, and it can be something that is peaceful. Being a student of human history and human nature, I understand that there's going to be violence around some of that. For me, I hope to be someone who is contributing to either the reconstruction or the peaceful, part of that, because there will have to be that afterwards, and you'll have to decide what role is most important to you. But I do think that there is ways to do it in a way that where we don't have to completely just like devolve into chaos. But maybe that's just the idealist in me. Who knows? Okay. What I will say about Pluto and Aquarius, and I was thinking about this after a friend of mine in Portland, which is really a progressive place, was talking about how to prepare for disasters. And really, we were going through like the individual prepping type of thing, but also starting to talk about beginning the conversation about how do we build communities, because really that's the way that we're going to be getting through these challenging times. I'll tell you, we have a really, really active Facebook group for the neighborhood that I live in Ypsilanti. It's a really eclectic, diverse, awesome group of people that when the power was going out, they were all trying to band together to help one another. People were like, do you need a charger for your phone? Do you need a hot meal or something like that? Like there's like and if someone was suffering, someone was always going to come to their aid. Like they're like, oh, I got a chainsaw you can borrow. Oh man, I've got an extra generator. My power's on. That to me is the highest expression of Aquarius energy and potential within Pluto and Aquarius, is how are we going to band together in communities to get us through the inevitable crises that are going to manifest and that are coming home to roost. What I will say, it's important to have some amount, I guess, of righteous indignation. That's okay. But recognize that it took a long time and a lot of different levers and gears to get to this point. And the solution isn't going to be instantaneous. The solution is going to need to be sustained over time and require some patience. Now, I know that many of you are saying, well, we don't have time. And you're probably right. So there is going to have to be a snapping into action of some sort. But also, there will have to be a sustained effort over time. Pluto is still in a Saturnian sign, which will reward sustained effort over the long haul and not just some one-off energetic push, if that makes sense. So that is what I have with Pluto. I hope that brought some clarity. Again, I'm trying to be a realist about it. I'm trying not to be too idealistic, but also not too doomsday about it. I really do feel that we are at a huge inflection point with the climate, though. I am very nervous about the climate. I just experienced 7 days of no power and heat, probably due to a climate change event. So it's very raw for me, and I think that many people are starting to have this affect them personally. We've been insulated from a lot of these challenges as a country, in America in particular, due to our wealth. But other countries are not so fortunate. And I think that and I'm not defending America's wealth. I know that there's all sorts of corruption that went into securing it and maintaining it. And I don't agree with those policies, for the record. But I also feel that we will have to be more aware of those on the fringes of society and those in exile and those in places that are more vulnerable as climate change accelerates, because those are the people that suffer first. When you have resources, you, like, for example, just even in our neighborhood, let's say the microcosm, if you have resources, you probably have a whole house backup generator. Let's say you are rich and you can afford to buy a $10,000 generator that supports your whole house. You're not going to suffer as much in that winter storm. Whereas if you don't have as many resources, you're not going to have anything. Like, you may not even have like food to eat. You see what I'm saying? Like, and that's a minor example of the bigger macrocosm. Okay, so I think we are going to have to really, find a way to make things more fair and equal as we move through Pluto in Aquarius. All right. So let's move forward and finish this thing off. We're heading towards hour 3, but there's a lot of astrology to get to, a lot of important astrology to discuss in this month in particular. So that's why I'm trying to take my time with it and trying to like unpack this stuff. I could divide these into shorter things, but I figure, I don't know, honestly, it's more work for me. It's more work to advertise each individual video and things like that. So I just try to get it all in this one thing, and you can find it if you look. Okay, so that's the 23rd, Pluto into Aquarius. When we get to the 25th, and we've talked about this a little bit, but we see Mars moving into Cancer. So Mars in Cancer, and I'm sighing because I'm a Cancer sun. So I know that I've had some really gnarly Mars in Cancer periods in my life where there was just a lot of conflict, domestic conflict. So I'm kind of girding my loins for this and hoping that it won't be like that at this point. But the good news is this: Mars does have a little bit of dignity in the first few degrees of Cancer. So it is in its own terms from 0 to 7 degrees of Cancer, and it is the triplicity ruler in the nighttime in Cancer as well. So what that means is that Mars is able to set its own agenda in the first few degrees of Cancer, even though it's not being provided resources in the way that it would normally want to be provided for. And it also has some communal support in Cancer as well. So there's ways to utilize your community with Mars in this sign. Again, what Mars is doing is it's taking an action, okay, separation, exerting its own will and agenda in a sign ruled by the moon, which is generally associated with security, with sensitivity, emotions, subtlety. A couple manifestations of this could be domestic conflict, arguments within the family, feeling estranged from a parent or like a sibling or something of that nature, or a child even, right? It could be where you feel a sense of indirectness of expressing your feelings and of expressing conflict. Cancer is not a very direct sign. We generally try to avoid conflict, us Cancerian folks, to keep peace. It doesn't mean we can't stir some shit up or defend ourselves. That's the thing. I would say Cancer is a sign, as a yin water sign, that isn't fond of initiating conflicts, but we will defend ourselves if we feel like our security is threatened. And it can be pretty ugly. Like, it's kind of mama bear energy, right? Where you're just like, if you feel like the people that you care about are threatened, we're scary people. But Mars in Cancer could make it more difficult for you to have a honest, direct, necessary confrontation with people in your life. So just be very careful about being passive aggressive with this, for um, being circuitous, like trying to like, if you're upset, a lot of times what Mars and Cancer will do is they'll kind of pout about it and brood about it, and then it's kind of a talk shit behind someone's back kind of aspect, right? Where you aren't going to confront the actual problem, but you will just like exude discontent to anyone who will listen or feel you, right? One of the things that I think cancers can do is make people feel the way that they can feel. It's a cardinal water emotional sign. And I've had to be really careful about this in my life because I feel like it's one of my superpowers, and it's also one of my challenges, is that it was great for music because I could make people feel what I felt on stage, and maybe even on this stage on some level. Like when I am happy and enthusiastic and hopeful and comforting, I think people can feel that. When I'm upset or angry or like divisive, people will feel that as well. And recognize that people are going to feel your energy with Mars and Cancer as well, and choose what you're going to do with it wisely. Because I think that it can be really toxic if you're letting that energy leak out in ways that are indirect. The other thing that I will say as a Cancer person, just in general, oftentimes I will tend to conflate one conflict with another. Like I'll let things build up where I get really upset about something that is indirectly related to the thing that I'm actually upset about because I haven't dealt with the thing that I'm actually upset about. And I think that with Mars and Cancer, this is a real possibility as well, as you may just like lose your stack at blow your stack at like something that is very minor because you're not confronting the major problem in your life. Okay. So just have patience with yourself. Try to have positive communication. I think that's the key. Try not to avoid difficult conversations, especially if it's with people in your inner circle that you care about, like your family members. You may have someone in your family that's suffering at this point, and you may have to have a really honest conversation with them. That could be the potential for Mars in Cancer as well. It's going to be fraught with a little bit of peril because all of these planets are moving through Aries. And I think that there's going to be a conflict between our needs, individual needs, and maybe the needs of the people we care about. And try not to let the stress and the pressure of that create a boiling point, right? And this is kind of a combination of fire and water here. We're going to simmer on something potentially. Try to avoid that if you can. All right. So when we get to the 26th, we have the moon moving out of bounds again for the final time in March. It'll be out of bounds from the 26th through the 31st. And so again, an emotional period of time. It's hosting Mars. So the moon goes out of bounds right as Mars moves into Cancer. See that? And so another extreme. Whenever a planet ingresses into a new sign, you're going to get some kind of new set of circumstances to deal with. So at the very beginning of Mars moving into Cancer with the moon out of bounds, just try to relax, even if there's something really scary that comes up or difficult. Because the moon's going to be out of bounds. It's going to be in aversion to Mars. We may be overthinking things during this period of time. Just try to chill out as much as you can, because Mars is going to start making a trine to Saturn. Okay. So we get to the 27th and 28th. We've got the applying trine from Mars to Saturn. We're going to have to figure out what we want to leave behind potentially, like what we want to move on from to find our sense of purpose. We may have to make some necessary cuts from people we care about to find something that really supports us. That's always very painful. Like this was something I went through earlier in this year with my daughter moving to college, and just, you become fairly enmeshed with your child for a long period of time, and then they move out and you have to figure out a new role that you play in each other's lives. Like the core of love is what will get you through it. The roles will change, the responsibilities will change, but the feelings hopefully will still be there. And that's another thing to think about with Mars and Cancer too, is you may have changing roles within your family and your domestic situation, but let your shared appreciation for one another move you through it, or the shared feelings, the shared experiences. All of those things can really unravel some really sticky knots that you can get into in this period of time. And when we get to the 28th, we have a conjunction of Mercury and Jupiter. So let's take a look at that real quick. How y'all doing? Everybody doing okay out there? Still there? Like, it's a long one. So here is Jupiter and Mercury coming together in the final degrees of the second decan of Aries. So around 18 to 19 degrees of Aries, which is very close to the exaltation of the sun at 19 degrees of Aries. So this is a Three of Wands energy, and Three of Wands is more about establishing a royal decree. So it's sort of like saying, okay, I know that I've separated from what I don't want to be, and now here is who I am. It's a solar decan with the exaltation degree of the sun. It says, I am this, and here is me, and here's what I want. Like, you know? And the third decan is a Venus ruled decan, where it says, I want this. Wouldn't it be great if you could come along and support me in doing this? Like, that's the Aries progression. It says, I'm not that. First decan. It says, I am this. Second decan. And wouldn't it be great if you could join me? Like, in third decan. Okay. So we might have some really interesting conversations about what it means to be you and to be an individual. You may be communicating your passionate desire to expand your sense of personal sovereignty and selfhood around this period of time. So I think that's one thing we're going on in this period. Simultaneously, Moon will be making a conjunction with Mars while it squares the sun. So we have this is our first quarter moon. This is where our individual new start, our really, intense new moon at 0 degrees Aries hits the first challenge point. It hits the first point where we say, how do you make this real? What other considerations do you have to take into account? How do you, it's a crisis of manifestation. So your individual desires may come in conflict with the people in your life, with the people that you count on for support. When we have an individual desire, it's very easy to get caught up in it and ignore the people that we either are responsible for or that we rely on. And as a Cancerian person, I will say, cherish those relationships. Those if you go off on this pioneering adventure and you discard those relationships, you could find yourself in a really lonely place eventually. You might find yourself in a really amazing place. If you have a toxic relationship with some of the people that you're close to, then that separation might be necessary. But if you have a supportive relationship, and let's just be honest, all of these relationships are a mixed bag, okay? There's going to be some parts of it that are amazing. There's going to be some parts that are super toxic. And if you have nothing but a good relationship with every single person in your family, well, you're very lucky, okay? But we're all flawed human beings, and you're going to be able to rely on certain people for some things, and you know that you can't have certain conversations with other people for other things. And that's okay. That's life, and that's normal, okay? So just at this first quarter moon, recognize that the disconnect between the Cancerian need for security and nurturing and your individual desires and wanting to make a new start and to individuate are going to be in conflict with one another, and they're going to require innovative problem solving. And here's one thing that's really nice about this. We are seeing a conjunction, a forming conjunction that will perfect on the 30th between Venus and Uranus, simultaneously while Mars and Saturn are trining. So this is pretty cool. This is like, okay, You know that there's some tension between your individual needs and the needs of your people you care about, your sources of security. You know that you could potentially discard some of the dreams that aren't working, these individual dreams, maybe. Okay. You got to get real about the dream. You know, sometimes the dream may cut you off from some support, but also you can utilize your resources in an individual, in a unique way. When Venus and Uranus come together in the second decan of Taurus, there may be some unexpected benefit that comes your way. Beneficiary, some sense of support. You may be required to support another in a way that was not expected, but if you have more, to feel good about helping someone at this point in time. If you are abundant, you know, you're going to really feel the joy of giving with a Venus-Uranus conjunction in the second decan of Taurus. This also might be a period of time where you find a new rhythm that supports the new dream that you're trying to pursue. Okay, there's a rhythmic showing up regularly and in this particular decan that I think is very important. I just think that this is something that could be good. I think that this is some unexpected good fortune, whether giving or receiving, during this Venus-Uranus conjunction in Taurus too. And really our intentions with Mars and Cancer are in alignment at this point with the responsibilities that we have with Saturn and Pisces. We have to maybe fight for a family member. This is another way we could look at Mars and Cancer. Maybe we have to go to battle for somebody we care about. Maybe we have a conflict where we become the warrior for the family. And maybe that is the crusade that we have to go on when it's trining Saturn and Pisces. Do you see what I'm saying? So that is the astrology of March. We're going to get one day of the sun moving into Aries 2, but we'll save that for next month. So Nick just came and he says, am I late to the party? Not really, Nick. But we're nearing the end of our time here together. We've been here for about 3 hours and change. And it's been quite an exploration, hasn't it? So what I'd like to do to end our time together today is I'd like to give you an animal to meditate on and an I-Ching reading. So I'm going to start with the I-Ching reading. I got number 37, which really seems to speak towards our Mars and upcoming Mars and Cancer energy. And really, if you think about it, Pluto and Aquarius on some level. Number 37 translates to the family, the household, family, the clan, close-knit groups, playing your part, establishing expectations, serving as an example, creating and maintaining trust. 3 changing lines that we have as we change from number 37 to number 10. Number 10 is treading, conduct, circumspection, treading carefully, watching your step. It's really about watching your behavior and saying, are you really, acting in integrity in this situation? Are you being careful about how you're moving about your world? Line number 2 says, not chasing after whim or desire. Remain in the center and prepare the food. Perseverance brings good fortune. So the notes I've written for this say that it's important to cultivate modesty and moderation. We've been talking about moderation this whole entire talk, okay? Because we might be inspired to go to extremes this month. But performing our everyday labors, which is related to our full moon in Virgo, bringing it full circle, and living up to our duties and responsibilities will bring good fortune. It's important not to pine after things that you don't have. It's stick to the business that is in front of you. I think we can get really unhappy in Pisces season when we start looking over our shoulders at what other people have and really feeling a sense of lack. I think it's important to find gratitude in whatever station that you're in around this period of time, because that can magnetize you. I do think that if you allow me a moment of woo for a second, I do think that gratitude is attractive. Okay, and I mean that in a lot of ways. A grateful person will attract more help. A grateful person will attract more support. A grateful person is someone who people want to be around. An ungrateful person is repellent. Okay, so practice that gratitude, and you'll be amazed at the things that come into your life. People love helping people that appreciate what has been done for them. You know, it's very difficult to continue to justify someone who, you know, throws it back in your face. It's like, screw you, that wasn't what I wanted. Like that's I mean, people do it and they suffer for it. So appreciation, gratitude, and not pining after things that are not in your sphere at this point. Line number 3, family members are scolded and rebuked. This is Mars and Cancer energy too. Repenting this severity brings good fortune. Yet if women and children giggle foolishly, there will be humiliation in the end. Okay, so some of these translations are based on ancient Chinese culture and the roles that they played in that culture. So we have to kind of think about that in a slightly different fashion for our modern sensibilities. But really, what this line I think is referring to is that close-knit groups, they need discipline, but they also need not to be too severe or strict. Like, this is, if you're feeling like you want to like make some changes personally, it's easy to kind of like point the finger at people in your immediate sphere and say, well, I could only be this if you would support me this way and you would do this. And if we were only more disciplined in this way, I would really recommend against that during this month in particular. Like, don't try to force your will on people. You might be feeling really inspired, but recognize that other people will be feeling inspired towards their individual ends as well. And how do we balance those things out? Set basic ground rules. Clarify your expectations. Use tenderness and mental discipline rather than severity and force. Take the middle path. Lead by example. Don't ask other people to do things that you aren't willing to do yourself. That's really important. I think that's some wisdom that we can find in line number 3. Line number 4 says, enriching the household, great good fortune. So this line is about working for others rather than merely for the self, which I think is a Pluto and Aquarius theme. How can you contribute to the group and community? Again, look at where Pluto is moving into in your chart. Where will you be required maybe to make a sacrifice for the collective and the good? Where can you contribute in a way that may not necessarily benefit you individually immediately, but is really the right thing to do for the good of the whole? Pay attention to the details. Offer your services to people. You know, circuits of exchange are important. If you are in a place of abundance, offer your excess to others. If you are in a position of need, have the humility to be able to accept help. This was something that was very difficult for me over the course of the last week or two. I'm usually someone who enjoys the giving, and sometimes it's hard for me to accept help. And it was very humbling for me to ask for help in the last week or so. But I feel enriched by it. You know, I feel grateful for the people that came to my aid. I feel it just showed me that I wasn't alone, that I wasn't abandoned in that situation. And it made me feel filled up and wanting to help other people in that regard as well. So where can you find that in your life? Where can you find the ability to give where it's needed, but also to receive help when you need it, to ask for help when you need it? That's important. You know, we all are going to have times when we need extra support, and it's the Wheel of Fortune energy. Sometimes you're at the top of the wheel and sometimes you're at the bottom, and that's okay. That's just life, and it just keeps on spinning. And what is true today, if you're at the top, you might not be tomorrow. So have gratitude for what you have. And if you're at the bottom, that situation might not last forever either. So have hope for the future. The animal that I got was the seahorse. I thought this is the most Piscean animal ever. Like, right? Seahorse is an animal associated, just floats around in the ocean, just floating from one place to the next. It's associated with placidity, right? Being placid, gentle movements, slowing down, enjoying your life. It has exceptional eyesight. It can actually look forward and backwards at the same time. So maybe that gives us some metaphorical significations. Maybe we need to reflect on our life, but also think about where we're going. Like this is the dual nature of Pisces on some level, where we can, learn from experience, but also have hope for the future. Try not to take things for granted is one of the things that came up in the research about Seahorse. Live in the moment. Bring peacefulness and gentleness to your nature. Sometimes when we are in a period of crisis, we will take actions due to the stress that aren't necessarily in our best interest. I experienced this firsthand over the last week. It's very hard to make clear choices when you are in fight or flight mode. And you have to make an effort to calm yourself down, to relax, and to figure out what is the best next action. And it's hard to do, friends. This is something that I will say, just if you learn nothing else, if I've learned nothing else, and what I can share is really have compassion for people who are in crisis mode. Because it's really easy to judge people that we deem less worthy or like lazy or something like that if they're in a different state than we are, whether economically or otherwise. That's a mistake. It's really difficult to make healthy choices when you're in a crisis mode. And I think it's really important to have compassion for that. And don't take your wealth and prosperity and abundance for granted or privilege, because Pluto in Aquarius is coming as a great equalizer. And maybe that great equalizer is Mother Nature. Maybe that great equalizer is technology. Maybe that great equalizer is life on other planets. I don't know. But again, this is why you should treat people with respect, no matter their station, because you never know when that's going to be you. So, friends, that is what I have for you today. Thank you so much for joining me today. Thank you so much for your support. Appreciate all of you. I'm so grateful for this community, so grateful for all the help that we've received over the last week. If you do want to support the work that I do here, support our recovery from our challenging experience, you can buy me coffee at buymecoffee.com, or buy the webinars. You can support Tanya at Third Coast Mojo by investing in some of her magical materia. She also has like custom blends that she's doing now. You can support me by purchasing my deck and webinars and also learning more about the stars and the cards. And the Stars and Cards webinar is available for purchase now as well. It's on sale until the end of March. So, friends, that's what I have for you here today. It's such a pleasure and an honor and a privilege for me to be able to speak with you every month and every week, hopefully. I will see you the next time. We're going to do a Saturn in Pisces Q&A next week. I'm probably not going to do a full moon in Virgo, just so you know, just as a heads up. And just to be gentle with yourself. Just float on the current of your life right now. You don't have to force anything right now. This isn't the time to force things. This is the time to just get in touch with your heart, in touch with your soul, in touch with your purpose, and to just breathe. Okay? All right, friends. That's what I've got. I'll see you the next time. Take care.